Chapter 518. The next day, Wu Zhankue came to find Jiang Xiu as promised to take the inner sect exam together. We are here to take the inner sect exam. Go in. The disciple at the door lazily filled in their information and went in. Remember to line up. When they came in, there were already more than a dozen people lined up in front of them. Among all the disciples, the number of inner sect disciples was actually the highest. There were relatively fewer outer sect disciples, and of course, the number of true disciples was the lowest. Looking at the horizon in the distance, between the white clouds, one could see a giant bell that emitted a faint golden light. Because the bell was far away, one couldn't tell how tall or big it was, but the color was deep and it felt very heavy. Jiang Xiu's life was loaded, and he had experienced all of this before. Although he was directly taken in as a true disciple, his master let him walk the path of a normal disciple. The purpose was to train him. That bell was the first test to become an inner sect disciple. In the mist, the sky bell was so big that it was impossible to see its full appearance. A white-haired old man stood below it, as small as an ant in a tall building. He carefully looked at the first disciple who came up for the exam. No matter how long you've been here, what stage you've reached, or what your cultivation is, stand behind the line and use your incantation. If you can't ring the bell, then you don't have the qualifications to become an inner sect disciple. You only have one chance. If you can't, then wait another 5 years. After he finished speaking, he took the registration information from the disciple beside him. Begin. Next, Wu Zicheng. The one who walked out was a young man wearing a brocade robe. Outer sect disciples were the disciples with the lowest status in the sect, but they were also a group filled with hope. They were the future of the sect. His eyes flashed as he continuously chanted. With a rumbling sound, the incantation turned into light sand and rushed towards the sky bell. The sky bell didn't move at all. Not qualified. Next. The outer sect disciple named Wu Zicheng's face fell. He dejectedly retreated to the side. The servant who came with him also had a look of pity. The second person who came up asked, "Can we use sword techniques?" The examiner pondered for a moment. His heart softened as he nodded and said, "Yes." Wu Zicheng said excitedly, "Why can't I?" The old man then said, "Your sword cultivation is too low, and using your sword to strike the bell is far inferior to using your voice to strike the bell. Even if I let you use your sword technique, there won't be any improvement. Of course, I can give you a chance, but if you don't succeed, I will cancel the chance 5 years from now. If you want to take the test again, you will have to wait 10 years. When this old man was young, he was also hot-tempered. However, as he grew older, he became more and more tolerant of his disciples. The sect's rule was that the sky bell had to be rung with the sound of the incantation, so he had lowered his requirements. In reality, so what if he passed this kind of test? For those who stumbled in the early stages of a tall building, it would be even more difficult for them to walk on the later stages. Then disciple will come back in 5 years. Wu Zicheng was scared away by the old man's words. Immortal slaying sword. So, the second disciple soared into the sky and slashed at the distant sky bell with his sword. The sharp sword light flashed and disappeared into the distance. The saber light instantly extended to 100 meters and heavily slashed at the sky bell. The heaven bell did not budge. Not qualified, not qualified. Next. The old man shook his head, looking very disappointed. The disciple who came to register couldn't even pass the first test. 2 senior brothers had failed in a row. The atmosphere in the examination hall suddenly changed. It was a little tense and a little serious. What's going on? How heavy is this sky bell? Even the immortal slaying sword can't break it. Wu Zhankue's expression became very serious. Oh no, I probably won't pass either. Jiang Xiu was indifferent. Not being able to strike the bell was not a problem with the sword technique, but with the person. The sword technique was ultimately used by the person. Although that person had put a lot of effort into becoming a sword immortal, the sword cultivation realm was too low and the power was too weak. In addition, as the old man said, something like a bell could not be struck by a fierce attack. It was more afraid of the continuous accumulation of power, like the waves of the sea. Using the sound of the incantation was the first choice. Moreover, it could also test the disciples' incantation foundation. Not qualified. Not qualified. Jiang Xiu's servants were also watching from outside. Xiao Yu said, "The test is actually so difficult. Can the young master pass?" The status of the inner sect disciples was much higher than that of the outer sect disciples. Although they were still in the lower three peaks, if they were servants of the inner sect disciples, they would feel superior when they walked out. They had said that the servants of the inner sect disciples felt that their eyes were on top of their heads. Next, Tan Ta Shui. It was a young girl. Her appearance was far from Shangguan Zhao Rong's. Although she was young, she was very calm and her eyes shone with a confident light. "Begin." The young girl bowed slightly to the old man. After she stood still, she held a lotus in her hand and her mouth continuously spat out a profound incantation. The sound of the incantation spread out, giving off a sense of boundless power. On Earth, there was a saying that the music came from aliens. This was because every country in the world had it and they were all at the same octave. The sound of the incantation was also a type of sound wave. It could let people feel the power contained in the sound of the incantation. When she opened her mouth, it was completely different from the previous people. That seemingly tangible power rushed out. Ding! The sound was not loud. It could even be said that it was inaudible. However, the old man laughed and said, "Qualified." Hua! There was an uproar in the field. Finally, there was a qualified person. Phew! The young girl let out a sigh of relief. Even she did not hear the sound, but the old man said that she passed. Of course, she knew that the old man would not be biased. It should have rung. Moreover, she could feel her incantation hitting the bell. Next, Wu Zhankui. It was finally their turn. Ma Dong did not expect that Lu Chongkong would call him over to ask about Jiang Xiu again. Because of this, Ma Dong even went to the law enforcement hall to ask the law enforcement senior brother. However, he did not get anything. Today, he heard that Jiang Xiu came out and participated in the inner disciple assessment. Therefore, he encouraged Xiao Wuchen to watch together with him. The main reason was to cause trouble. If Jiang Xiu entered the inner disciple assessment again, then he would be on the same level as him. Senior brother Wuchen, that kid's saber is quite interesting. If he wants to use it later, you have to stop him. This is also Elder Lu's idea. Lu Chongkong only asked him to pay attention to Jiang Xiu's actions. Nothing else was wrong. Ma Dong was using the chicken feather as an arrow. Don't worry. This kid won't be able to enter the inner disciple. Wu Zhankui came to the back of the line anxiously. His hands turned into a cloud of black smoke. As he waved his hands, he suddenly rushed out and formed a huge fist towards the sky bell. Forget about incantations and sword techniques. Fist techniques were his specialty. Luo Yen Godly Fist. Ring it. The fist collided with the sky bell, and the cloud of smoke surged. Failed. Wu Zhankui revealed his true form with a depressed face. His servants also lowered their heads. Ha ha ha. Someone laughed. It was Xiao Wuchen. He could see that this person was the most shameless among all of them. He directly turned into a cloud of smoke and rushed over, which was equivalent to crossing the line. Even so, he didn't ring the sky bell. Looking at Wu Zhankui's hopeless face, he couldn't help but laugh. Next, Jiang Xiu. Finally, the elder shouted Jiang Xiu's name. Although this person was a newcomer, he was amazing. On the first day, he kicked the elder's son off the cliff. On the second day, he went to jail. He was already a legend. Jiang Xiu. Which one is Jiang Xiu? A godlike handsome man casually walked out. He's really stupid. Ma Dong anxiously shouted. Exam elder, let me remind you that this kid is a troublemaker. He might cheat. You can't let him use a blade. Yes, yes, yes. Li Chong and Shangguan Zhao Rong were anxious. Shangguan Zhao Rong secretly said that these people were too despicable. Young master was a blade cultivator. Why couldn't he use a blade? Wasn't this bullying? My young master wants to use a blade. Everyone else uses what they're best at. That's right. Xiao Yu's tears were about to fall. Why were these people targeting young master? Was it because he was new? When the elder saw Zhang Xiu, a trace of displeasure flashed across his face. There was no other reason. He was too troublemaker. No teacher liked a naughty student. He said, using a blade is forbidden. Also, don't think about cheating. Don't be like the person in front of you, openly crossing the line. In the end, the sky bell still didn't ring. Zhang Xiu coldly glanced at Qin Wentian. Before he could even start, the first divine imprint on Zhang Xiu's arm suddenly erupted with an intense light. Zhang Xiu's long hair fluttered in the wind as he howled madly. His eyes flashed with an intense light as he uttered an incantation that shook the heavens and earth. The first sound of the heavens and earth. Hong. The moment the sound rang out, the sky bell suddenly shook. Boom! The sky bell exploded, shaking heaven and earth. A strong sound wave rushed over, and the surrounding disciples were all sent flying. The sound traveled thousands of miles and resounded throughout the Qianqing school. Damn! Heavens, the sky bell was shattered by his curse. Pervert! Zhang Xiu's eyes were cold. Ji Daozong, this is the death knell this sovereign has rung for you. This sovereign has returned. Chapter 519. The sound waves reverberated far and wide. Everyone in the Qianqing school could hear it clearly from any angle. It also resounded in the residence of the sect leader on the main peak of the Qianqing school. The sect leader and the 13 celestial kings all heard it. There was an uproar in the examination hall. Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhang Xiu. They were all extremely shocked. He directly shattered the sky bell. What a freak! Zhang Xiu's expression was still indifferent. Although the first sound of heaven and earth was in a different world, its power could only be stronger in a stronger world. It was the origin of all sound, so its power could be imagined. Unfortunately, he only mastered the first sound and didn't have a complete system or specific meaning. Otherwise, its power would be even more shocking. The old man crawled out from the pile of fragments of the sky bell and the broken roof tiles. His head was like a weed, and he was dumbfounded. He couldn't recover from his shock. After a while he said, Espas, this sky bell had been hanging here for God knows how many years. It was the first time that it had been destroyed by a disciple from the outside world using talisman sounds. He couldn't even speak clearly. It could be seen how shocked the old man was. Young master passed? Even the bell was shattered. How is that not enough? Xiao Wuchen, Ma Dong, and the others were completely dumbfounded. This person was really an evil creature. It was already very rare for others to make a sound, but in the end, he directly shattered the bell. How much hatred does this bell have for you? Those who pass, go down. As Zhang Xiu turned and left, the old man cast a deep glance at him. Over 3,000 years ago, even the previous sect leader of the immortal martial sect, Zhang Luo, wasn't as ferocious as him. The second test was speed. It was a misty sky. It looked very close, but in fact, it contained a formation. Many parts of the space were sunken and distorted. It looked extremely strange. The second test is mainly about escape techniques. Before the formation is triggered, you have to rush to the other side. Zhang Xiu looked up. With his eyesight, he could see how far the space inside the formation was. It was about 100 miles, compressed into a small circular space. Outside the formation, the incense burner would burn for the time it took to burn an incense stick. Once the incense burned out, the formation would press down, directly pressing down. It would be like a person passing through a cloud of dust. He would fall rapidly and would definitely fall miserably. 100 li. That's too far. I have to use my escape technique. My escape technique is 1 li. Doesn't that mean I have to use it 100 times? I don't have that much magic power. My sect's heaven walk steps allows me to travel 1.5 li in a single step. I should be able to do it more than 60 times in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. The key is how I regulate my breathing. When Zhang Xiu arrived, there was already a group of people inside. The girl who passed the first round was also there. She still had a confident smile on her face. When they saw Zhang Xiu coming over, many people present looked over. The bell just now was really loud. Everyone was guessing who it was. According to the order of entry, it was most likely this person in front of them. However, there was also a possibility that they were wrong. In the distant sky, a ray of light was thrown over. It was astonishingly fast, like a graceful swan. In the next moment, it arrived in the field. Its speed was beyond the limit, and it had already surpassed the existence of ordinary matter. It felt like the martial cultivators on Earth had surpassed the sound barrier. It was a great visual impact. After cultivating for 2 lifetimes, Zhang Xiu naturally knew that it was the power of an immortal king. When everyone saw it, they all bowed. The examination elder also hurriedly went up to greet it. Subordinate greets Elder Ing. Ing Ho, the law enforcement elder of Chenqing School, one of the 13 immortal kings. Zhang Xiu couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the person who came. His first reaction was to dodge. Elder, why are you here? Ing Ho said. With such a loud bell, the entire Chenqing School was alarmed. Those who didn't know would think that the sex alarm bell was rung and that a great enemy was attacking. His gaze swept across the crowd. With such a big lineup, of course he had to come and see what kind of genius it was. If it was suitable, he had the intention to take it under his wing. I know that your assessment is important. There's no need to entertain me. You can continue. The examination elder nodded, cleared his throat, and said, Then we'll begin. The first one is Chen Daji. Yes. The first to come out was a tall man. He entered the array at the first moment. His figure flashed, and he quickly rushed to the far end. In the array, there was only a straight path in front of him. After 100 miles, he would reach the end. From the outside, he looked like a ray of light, bringing along after-images as he passed through the distorted space. So fast. This was like a long-distance race. If one was fast at the beginning, they wouldn't be fast all the way to the end. They had to use their spiritual energy reasonably. I wonder if the later stage can hold on. 50 miles. 60. After passing the halfway mark, his speed dropped significantly. He was different from mortals. Mortals couldn't release their full speed all at once. They had to release it slowly and clench their teeth to hold on until the end. However, immortals had much better control over their spiritual energy. They could release it all in an instant and collapse at the end. Therefore, they could collapse at any time. I can't take it anymore. Mystic Sun meets snow. Just as his spiritual energy was exhausted, he let out a low shout. His entire body seemed to have been revived on the spot. He immediately recovered his spiritual energy and rushed to the far end once again. Mystic Sun meets snow, yin and yang intertwining. Good technique. However, overdrawing the immortal body like this has serious consequences. I'm afraid that I won't be able to recover after a year and a half. If I can become an inner sect disciple, this little sacrifice is nothing. Before he finished speaking, the world in the array suddenly caved in. The distorted space pressed into the ground. The disciples inside were directly pressed to the bottom of the sky. Ah! Only inhuman screams could be heard coming from under the smoke. Time's up. So fast. The people behind who hadn't taken the test were extremely shocked. They turned their heads to look. Didn't the incense burn out? It was so fast just watching from the side. They would definitely feel even faster if they were in the array. It felt like the time it took for an incense to burn out. It was simply a technique that passed in the blink of an eye. You're not qualified. Next, many people in the following test could only last 30 to 40 miles. There weren't many who could last even half of the distance. It wasn't limited by insufficient spiritual energy. It was more because their speed was too slow and their understanding of the escape technique was insufficient. Next, Tan Takshu. Elder, can I take a shortcut? Shortcut? The testing elder looked puzzled. There was only one straight path in the array. Why would she take a shortcut? There are no rules. No matter what, you just have to arrive before the incense burns out and activates the array. Tan Takshu's face lit up. After she entered the array, she saw that after she used the escape technique, the effect on the outside was different from that of the others. The others had distorted space. After she used it, it was no longer a distorted space. Instead, it was a semi-spherical shadow. Floating space escape technique. The elder was shocked. No wonder she said she took a shortcut. It turns out that she has mastered a higher level escape technique. It's rare. Having a higher level escape technique was one thing. Mastering it was another. I'm here. She arrived just before the incense burned out. Tan Takshu heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest. Qualified. Next, Zhang Xiu. When Zhang Xiu's name was called, everyone looked over. Ing Ho's eyes also fell on Zhang Xiu. He just glanced at him and pondered for a moment. Maybe it was because he felt familiar, or maybe it was because Zhang Xiu was a divine cultivator. Zhang Xiu's heart skipped a beat. However, he was a divine cultivator and used a saber. His appearance had changed so much. Most importantly, since everyone in the Chenqing school thought that he was dead, there should be no reason for them to think of him. If they suspected that he was Zhang Luoxia's people, he would be a great suspect. Because they knew that Zhang Luoxia was not dead. It's him. He was the one who rang the bell just now. The examination elder also had a special impression of Zhang Xiu. Because of his outstanding performance in the last round, many people thought highly of Zhang Xiu's talent. He also wanted to see how strong Zhang Xiu was. Zhang Xiu walked out unhurriedly. Come on, young master. Shangguan Zhaorong and the others also came here to watch Zhang Xiu's test. Only the servants of the disciples who entered the second round could enter. They could be considered to be awe-inspiring. Chapter 520. Let's begin. The exam elder was also looking forward to seeing if Zhang Xiu would shine in this round. At the same time, he was also looking forward to seeing if Zhang Xiu would fail in this round. That would be interesting. Looking at the array in front of him, Zhang Xiu felt that it was very interesting. In the past, he hated array formations. It was too complicated and cumbersome. There were too many things to calculate and too much knowledge to learn. But for the sake of the position of the sect master, he forced himself to study and study hard. In the end, he became an array formation master. He slowly walked into the array. He will succeed? There was a gentle breeze in the array, causing his clothes to flutter. The powerful incantation did not mean that the escape technique was superb, especially for a young cultivator like him. He only had so much time in total. Under the circumstances of limited time, if he could master one thing, he would not have the time to learn anything else. He saw the scene inside the formation distort strangely. He only took a step forward, and his figure came out from the other end of the strange formation. He did it so casually. The law enforcement disciple who lit the incense did not have time to retract his hand. He turned his head and saw Zhang Xiu come out from the other end of the array. What's going on? He arrived? The incense was just lit and he arrived? What's going on? How did he suddenly appear 100 miles away? When everyone realized that Zhang Xiu was really standing at the end of the array, the onlookers all shouted. This was too inconceivable. It was simply unimaginable. Clatter. The register in the law enforcement elder's hand fell to the ground. How did he do it? After so many years of taking the test, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. He arrived in an instant. This speed was probably comparable to an immortal king. But he was clearly only a lower heaven god. After a while, the exam elder recovered from his shock and said, Zhang Xiu pass. A smile appeared on Zhang Xiu's face. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was completely shocked by Zhang Xiu's performance. First, it was the sound of the bell that resounded through the entire sky. Then, it was Zhang Xiu who could travel hundreds of miles in an instant. He had never seen such a stunning new disciple. One of the elders in the crowd said, "How is it? Did you see that? This kid was able to break through during the Jialan dynasty's selection. It's clear that he's a genius. You guys should feel the pressure. Apart from him, don't underestimate Song Gongming and Yi Fei. Their talents are 1 in a million. Song Gongming, I know. Half a month ago, he defeated senior brother Lu Jian, who was known as a genius in the inner sect. Now, many people are talking about him. Song Gongming indeed has the right to be arrogant. Yi Fei too." That elder said, "Could it be that this Zhang Xiu isn't?" Until now, everyone was still very confused. How did Zhang Xiu know? Because they didn't know how Zhang Xiu did it, they felt even more shocked. Their whole person was covered with a layer of mystery. Humans were always more in awe of the unknown. Some people glanced at Elder Ing Ho. Only this immortal king realm expert could answer their doubts. His gaze was fixed on Zhang Xiu. At a certain moment, he felt a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't remember who Zhang Xiu was. However, very quickly, Zhang Xiu brought him a pleasant surprise. He lightly spat out 2 words, "Break the formation." Only then did everyone understand. Zhang Xiu's unimaginable methods were revealed to everyone. Although this heaven and earth great formation was hundreds of miles wide, it wasn't a straight line. Once the formation was broken, a small escape technique would be able to reach it. So it's like this. Then this kid's attainments in formations are extremely high. Breaking the formation was much harder than using an escape technique to travel hundreds of miles in an incense's time. What a pity, what a pity. Ing Ho's eyes revealed admiration, but he also sighed helplessly. He regretted that Zhang Xiu was only a divine cultivator. If he was an immortal cultivator, he would take Zhang Xiu in as his disciple no matter what. This kid was definitely a talent to be an elder. However, if he was a divine cultivator, he couldn't accept him. He wasn't a spiritual cultivation expert, so how could he be a teacher? So it's to break the formation. Everyone looked at Zhang Xiu again. Previously, they only felt that this person was arrogant and didn't know how to restrain himself, but now the formation had added a halo of wisdom to him. Those who learned the formation were all wise people with outstanding wisdom. Young master is too amazing. Xiaoye was extremely excited. Li Chong also found it difficult to remain calm. When he was in the Jialan Zhang family, he had already been amazed by Zhang Xiu. However, the more he interacted with Zhang Xiu, the more mysterious and powerful he felt. Even when he came to the Qianqing school, where geniuses were everywhere, he was already a genius, a true genius among geniuses. I wonder how fast his cultivation is. The content of the 3rd test was the outer sect battle. In the Qianqing school, there was a cliff. On it was the ranking of the outer sect disciples. The examination elder would hang a wooden plate with the disciple's name on it and then arrange the group. The examination elder may have been annoyed by the disciples' questions. You can ask your senior brothers and sisters about the rules of the group. Don't come to ask me. In the Qianqing school, the last elimination system was implemented. The last outer sect disciple would be eliminated, and the last few inner sect disciples would fall to the outer sect. There was no doubt that the inner sect disciples had a great advantage over the outer sect disciples. Young master, do you want Zhao Rong to inquire about the rules of the ranking? Zhang Xiu shook his head gently and said, "No, it's the same as anyone." These words were extremely arrogant, but spiritual cultivation was telling the truth. On the side, a senior sister who was quite qualified reminded him, "You're a newcomer, right? If you don't even know the rules, I advise you to take advantage of the time before it's your turn to go to the ancient sect to gain experience. Kill some demons and monsters and accumulate some actual combat experience. Otherwise, hee. Yes, we were all stunned the first time we participated. Our fellow disciples were so ruthless. Every move was fatal, and they showed no mercy." Zhang Xiu smiled faintly. What was the point of the inner sect battle if you showed mercy everywhere? When you were really facing life and death, would others show mercy? Absolutely not. He was only afraid that you wouldn't die thoroughly enough. Thank you for your advice. A voice came from the side. Hey, will you participate in the outer sect battle? Turning his head, it turned out to be the girl named Tan Takshu. She was close to Zhang Xiu. They were all participating in the examination together. She had already faintly regarded Zhang Xiu as a rival. I'm going to give up. I'll come back in 5 years. She had been observing here for a while. She felt that her strength was not enough, so she could only endure. This was a very down-to-earth and planned girl. She was not like some people who entered the Qianxing school with the attitude of trying their luck. No one who entered the Qianxing school was a vegetarian. Zhang Xiu said, "Of course." More people were talking about the rewards if they won. In the distance, there was a beautiful girl and a servant girl who were paying attention to the situation of the outer sect battle. "Miss, what's so interesting about the battle between the outer sect disciples?" the young lady said. "Actually, the most interesting ones are the outer sect, because they are the hope of the sect. Every time, there will be new disciples appearing. Furthermore, there are only so many true disciples coming and going. Everyone knows the ins and outs of the competition, and they all know who will win and who will lose." Then has Miss paid attention to anyone? The girl's gaze searched through the countless people and finally fell on Zhang Xiu. She said, "Him." It was not because she knew that Zhang Xiu was talented, but because Zhang Xiu had helped her a little that day. This girl was Qin Qing. "Is he very powerful?" Qin Qing said with a smile, "Very powerful. He kicked Gu Qian down the mountain." "So it's him." The servant girl was very surprised. She looked carefully at Zhang Xiu. "He's really brave. He even dared to offend Mr. Gu. He'll definitely have a hard time in the Qianxing school in the future." Qin Qing said, "Indeed. Gu Qian wasn't drunk that day and wouldn't have lost so much face. And with Gu Qian's personality, he'll definitely be in trouble. Are we just going to let him be?" Qin Qing said, "What else can we do? I didn't ask him to help. If he wants to be a hero, he needs to have the strength of a hero. Otherwise, he'll end up being a coward. Besides, I can't help him even if I want to. I'm almost annoyed to death by Gu Qian." Suddenly, there was a commotion in the distance. A handsome man was walking towards them, surrounded by a group of people. Qin Qing suddenly reached out and grabbed her maid. In a flash, they appeared in the distant mountains. She said unhappily, "Gu Qian is here. Why is he here to watch the outer sect battle?" Chapter 521. As the outer sect station was open to the public, the sound of the heavenly drum being beaten spread out. Heroes from all sides nearby rushed over. Some of these people were the sect leaders of small sects, some were the patriarchs of large clans, rich people, strong cultivators, loose cultivators, and even some emperors. So many people. Shangguan Zhao Rong and the other maidservants were dazzled by the scene in front of them. In the middle of the sky, there were dozens of huge floating peaks that could rise and fall, and all around them were spectators. So spectacular! The spectators' seats were all very high, and looking down from above, they could even see the mountains surrounding the floating peaks that were shrouded in smoke. Young master." Shangguan Zhao Rong's voice was a little strange. Zhang Xiu followed her line of sight and saw a few disciples. The leader was actually Gu Qian, who was kicked off the cliff by him. It was said that he fell very miserably. Those who came did not come with good intentions. Their qi is so strong. Even if Shangguan Zhao Rong did not cultivate, she could directly feel it. This was deliberately done by Gu Qian and the others to intimidate the surrounding disciples. It was much more effective than shouting that they were true disciples. The appearance of this true disciple also attracted a lot of attention. In addition, this child was the son of an elder. His status was revered. One must know that it was not easy for a cultivator to have a child. Now that they finally had a child, they all treated it as a treasure. As expected of a true disciple, this aura, tescatus. Many people sighed in amazement. Zhang Xiu was still indifferent, and did not feel anything at all. He found that his stunning performance in the previous 2 tests was quickly drowned out by the chaotic crowd. More and more people's gazes were focused on the true disciples, elders of the sects, and others. Stop! A lazy voice was heard, but it carried a commanding tone that left no room for doubt. What's the matter? The one who stopped Zhang Xiu was the true disciple, the son of an elder, Gu Qian. His gaze fell on Zhang Xiu's face, and he laughed involuntarily. You still dare to ask me what the matter is? He was kicked off the cliff by Zhang Xiu when he was drunk. Now, he had become the laughingstock of the upper 3 peaks, which made him lose face. It was already a bit embarrassing that he couldn't get the girl. He even drank to drown his sorrows and was kicked off the cliff by a small outer sect disciple. There were more than 30 fractures all over his body. If it wasn't for his immortal body, his life would be over. Zhang Xiu just looked at him indifferently. Shangguan Zhaorong and the others on the side were so nervous that their faces turned pale. You brat, you really have guts. You actually dared to kick me. Zhang Xiu said, Why wouldn't I dare? Could it be that you want to fight me here? Gu Qian sneered, Brat, you're very smart. Of course, no one would dare to make a move on the assessment grounds, and I wouldn't either. Did you think that I wouldn't be able to deal with you then? Zhang Xiu was calm and composed. I heard that your talent isn't bad. No wonder you're so arrogant. However, you've offended me, Gu Qian. Do you think you can still make a name for yourself in Tianqing School? Let me tell you, dream on. He slowly approached Zhang Xiu. His voice was very soft, but that low voice made people feel incomparably scared. Gu Qian was completely different when he was sober and when he was drunk. He was domineering and cold. I want you to deliberately lose in the outer sect battle. If you dare to win, I'll cut off your hand. Shangguan Zhaorong's face completely changed when she heard this. The inner sect battle was only held once every 5 years. If the young master missed it, he would have to wait for another 5 years. During these 5 years, Zhang Xiu's resources could only be those of the outer sect disciples. Then, his cultivation would be delayed. He would be left far behind by his peers. At that time, he would no longer have the title of a genius. He would no longer be dazzling. The sect's support for him would decline and he would be destroyed. Zhang Xiu responded softly, Oh. Brat, be sensible. Although Gu Qian couldn't make a move, he still slammed into Zhang Xiu and forced him aside. Then, he walked past him. The little brother beside him even reached out and pushed Zhang Xiu. Get out of the way, don't block the way. Xiaoye said anxiously, Young master, what should we do? Do we have to listen to him? If they didn't listen, Gu Qian would definitely do what he said. However, if they listened, their future would be ruined. Zhang Xiu looked at their receding figures and thought of Gu Daqian. When he was in power, Gu Daqian could be considered to have supported him. To be more precise, this person was very deep. He wasn't weak, and he was even more scheming. Generally, he followed the crowd. He didn't know how much he was involved in the early change of sect leader. Let's go. But young master. What Zhang Xiu didn't expect was that Qin Qing had seen everything from afar. Under her special attention, she knew everything that happened between the two of them. She brought her servant and appeared in front of Zhang Xiu. It's you. Qin Qing's expression was serious as she said, Let's talk in private. Zhang Xiu said, We don't seem to have anything to talk about. Qin Qing's servant was furious. How important was the young miss? A true disciple came to find him, and he still put on airs. She said angrily, You, Zhang Xiu said, if you have something to say, say it. If not, I don't have time to stay. Qin Qing thought to herself that he had quite a personality. She could only say, I heard everything senior brother Gu said to you. So what? Qin Qing said, Then aren't you afraid? Zhang Xiu coldly snorted. Every disciple that was targeted by Gu Qian would be frightened. After being bullied for a long time, they would have to bear a lot of pressure and fear. Afraid? Why should I be afraid? Qin Qing's servant interrupted. You're still stubbornly holding on. Qin Qing said, Senior brother Gu is Elder Gu's beloved son. Elder Gu only has this one son, and he treasures him dearly. Elder Gu is also famous for being protective of his children. Offending senior brother Gu is really troublesome. Previously, a few of my fellow disciples offended him. Some of them were framed and imprisoned, some of them were forced to leave the sect with a crime, and some were forced to commit suicide. Some of the people she mentioned were her original suitors. There were also some who couldn't stand to see Gu Qian go against him. So, Zhang Xiu still didn't believe it. Qin Qing said, So, you should listen to him and give up on the outer sect competition. There's no need to show off for a moment and throw yourself into it. Of course, if you give up on the outer sect competition, you'll lose the qualifications to enter the inner sect. Your cultivation resources will be greatly reduced, and it will greatly affect your cultivation speed. She hesitated for a moment before saying, This matter is related to me. How about this, the resources you lose in these 5 years, I can make it up to you. Miss Zhang Xiu said, You'll make it up to me? Zhang Xiu was also a bit surprised. Resources were money, and she was giving it to him for free. Of course, it couldn't be considered for free. After all, Zhang Xiu was helping her to get out of trouble. But if she was willing to give him money like this girl's heart wasn't bad. She was still captivated by his elegance, and didn't hesitate to do such a thing. Qin Qing said, Yes, I'll make it up to you. 5 years is enough for him to forget about this matter. This way, it can be considered a compromise. Of course, an inner sect disciple's resources couldn't be compared to a true disciple's. A true disciple had a master. In addition to the sect's normal high proportion of resources, the master would occasionally give you some if she was in a good mood. An inner sect disciple's resources were only about 1/10 of that, which was within the range she could bear. You should think about it carefully. You should know where to find me. At that time, you didn't come by yourself. You'll only cause trouble. In the future, let her come. Qin Qing pointed at Shangguan Zhaorong, who was standing behind Zhang Xiu. Gu Qian was pursuing Qin Qing. If he saw Zhang Xiu walking close to Qin Qing, then the consequences would be even more serious. But if it was a girl who came in and out of Qin Qing's place, then there wouldn't be such a possibility. Remember my words. You must not provoke Gu Qian again. After saying this, Qin Qing glanced at Zhang Xiu and turned to leave. That's great, young master. Even if he doesn't enter the inner sect, it won't affect his cultivation. Moreover, it wasn't 100% certain that Zhang Xiu would enter the inner sect. Although the maidservants were very confident, there was still some suspense. This was equivalent to a guaranteed entry. Young master, this fairy is quite a good person. Even if you helped her, she actually repaid your kindness. Could it be that she has taken a liking to you? Shangguan Zhaorong asked. It must be. Xiaoye giggled. In the middle of the floating peak, the examination elders had already begun drawing lots. First, they had to put their names on the stone wall. Sometimes it was a horizontal line, sometimes it was a vertical line. Then, they began to draw the 2 sides for the battle. Although it wasn't very fair, it prevented cheating to a certain extent. Chapter 522. Coincidentally, Zhang Xiu's opponent in the 4th region had a seeded contestant. Of course, this wasn't announced by the officials, but by the disciples themselves. His name was Yi Fei, and he was a contestant with outstanding strength. Apart from a few who had hidden their strength and shocked the world with a single brilliant feat, the disciples were well aware of the cultivation level of most of the disciples, and had sparred with them on a daily basis. There was also another disciple who fell from the inner sect, Ma Mingrong. However, it was hard to say what kind of person he was. After falling, some people would strive to catch up, while others would be unable to recover from the setback. Heaven's path flame burst fist. Yi Fei roared angrily, and his entire body flew up into the air. He threw a punch at his opponent, and with a bang, blazing sparks flew everywhere. Suddenly, the flames rose sharply, engulfing the explosive power. Zhang Xiu had once simplified this fist technique and passed it on to the military on Earth. However, compared to the flames that filled the sky, the shadows of the fist within, and the sounds of explosions that rang out incessantly, the difference was insignificant. So strong! The people below the stage all called out for the battle. To be able to exert such great power from this mid-level fist technique, one could see that his comprehension and talent were indeed extraordinary. His opponent was directly sent flying by the power of the flames in front of him. Yi Fei wins. When he came down, he said, "Not bad, the first opponent is not bad. This is just the beginning, don't expose too much of your strength." The people beside him reminded him, "I know that." The competition proceeded very quickly. The gap between the outer disciples was quite big. Some were still at the earthen immortal stage while some were already at the heavenly immortal stage. The celestial motion sect mainly looked at one's talent and not one's current strength. 4th Region, 13th Group. Shangguan Zhao Rong had been paying attention, and reminded him, "Young master, it's our turn." Zhang Xiu flew up the floating peak, but his opponent was already one step ahead. He glanced at his opponent, who was in the early stage of lower heaven immortal. His opponent held a long sword, and the sword's edge flashed with light, looking very sharp. "Lose." That person abruptly thrust out his long sword and pointed his sword finger at the floating long sword. The flying sword in the air split into 2, then into 4. In the blink of an eye, dozens of flying swords spread out. The sword-splitting technique of the natal sword body. Go! He then charged forward, and the floating swords seemed to have a strong connection with his body, moving with him. He then pointed his finger at Zhang Xiu. Whoosh! 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 Countless flying swords shot towards Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu secretly shook his head. This sword-splitting technique was not an attack. Low-level sword cultivators always had a misconception that the more swords they had, the more powerful they would be. This was not wrong, but with such a low cultivation and Dharma power, controlling so many flying swords was like an old cow pulling a cart. It was like a person struggling to hold a sword, so how could he cause great damage? If he was not careful, he might even hurt himself. Zhang Xiu's eyes swept over, bringing with them a terrifying cold light. He gently raised his hand and flicked his finger. This flick caused a thunderous explosion in the sky. The energy from his fingertip rushed out, like a spray machine, instantly piercing through the void. Suddenly, it expanded and rushed over like a violent tsunami. Whoosh! The two of them were not more than 100 meters away when they saw the flying swords were all blown back as if they had encountered a typhoon. However, in the fierce wind, there was a flash of light. That disciple shouted, "My sword!" When the light faded, it could be seen that the sword in the air was directly crushed into pieces by the power and fell to the ground. Unsurprisingly, Zhang Xiu won the first round. He dares to win? Gu Qian's expression turned cold, and his eyes were filled with anger. He definitely doesn't dare to. Does he want to die? This is only the first round, and he wants to experience it. However, this kid is quite strong. This move seems to be mainly the transformation of the spell, someone at the side said. Immortal martial arts was the fusion of immortal and martial arts. The lower levels were mainly based on martial arts and immortal martial arts were supplementary. However, the higher the level, the more immortal martial arts were the main. Zhang Xiu was only at this level, but he was using immortal martial arts as the main force, and the power was so strong. It was really shocking. So what? Destroying a genius is much more interesting than destroying an idiot. The group of people laughed sinisterly. "Miss, how did he win? This is only the first round. Gu Qian did not allow him to enter the inner sect." Young master, Shangguan Zhao Rong and the others were very conflicted. On one hand, they were happy to see Zhang Xiu win. On the other hand, they knew that Zhang Xiu had to lose. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Too hateful. Unsurprisingly, in the next round, the second round, the third round, the fourth round, until the seventh round, Zhang Xiu advanced triumphantly. He defeated all his opponents with one move. He did not spend any effort at all, and his points were getting higher and higher. Zhang Ge, you are too strong. You actually won 7 consecutive rounds so easily. It seems that I was worried about you for nothing. Ha ha ha. Wu Zhankue also came to watch the battle. When he saw Zhang Xiu return with another big victory, he laughed loudly. Zhang Ge has a lot of hope. Zhang Xiu treated him coldly. Shangguan Zhaorong also did not like him. However, Wu Zhankue was not embarrassed at all. Shangguan Zhaorong whispered in Zhang Xiu's ear, "Young master, the next round is the strongest, Yi Fei. In the 9th district, only you and him have won. If you win again, you will definitely enter the inner sect. You are going to lose." Zhang Xiu's winning streak and his outstanding performance in the first 2 rounds had attracted a lot of attention. His promotion index kept rising. Your strength is not bad. Miss, I remember that it was not so easy for you to enter the inner sect. Indeed. Qin Qing looked at Zhang Xiu. What a pity. Qin Qing turned her eyes to Gu Qian. This person was really abominable. He actually used such a method to persecute her junior brother. It was a huge loss for the sect that such a talent was suppressed. The next round is the most important one. This kid must lose. Gu Qian's face revealed a playful expression. Playing with the fate of others in the palm of his hand made him feel incomparably excited. The thrill of destruction was one aspect, but more importantly, he liked to see Zhang Xiu's expression of being humiliated but not daring to speak up. Next round, Yi Fei versus Zhang Xiu. Whoosh! Yi Fei flew towards the center of the stage like a bird. It felt as if he had merged with the wind, invisible and traceless. Good movement. The people below the stage cheered. Yi Fei had hidden his strength before. Now, he was actually at the middle stage of lower heaven immortal. That inconceivable ethereal feeling should be related to refining the immortal wind. Junior brother Zhang, please advise me. Although his words were polite, his tone was playful. Junior brother Zhang, you use a saber, right? I will stand here and let you cut me. If you can cut me, you win. Whoosh! As soon as he said that, the whole audience was in an uproar. From Yi Fei's movement just now, it could be seen that this person was talented, especially his understanding of wind. It was ethereal and free, which seemed to be different from others. His previous opponents, no matter how fast their swordsmanship was, could not catch up with his movement. Now that he showed a stronger strength, perhaps Zhang Xiu's saber really could not cut him. Too arrogant. There was no way to play. If he could not cut him even if he stood there and let him cut him, what was the point of this? This is not arrogance, but confidence. Although Zhang Xiu has been winning before, it was because the opponents he met were very weak. His winning streak was largely due to luck. This was a duel that everyone was paying attention to. Yi Fei is too scary. He did not use his full strength before. Zhang Xiu's eyes were indifferent, but he glanced at the distance. There stood Gu Qian, the successor disciple and the son of an elder. Gu Qian raised his head proudly with a playful smile on his lips, as if to say that Zhang Xiu's fate was in his hands. You don't regret it? Of course. Zhang Xiu lifted his hand slightly. Suddenly, a beam of blade light shot out. With a swoosh, it was a beam of light that disappeared in a flash. However, at this moment, everything in the world seemed to be cut apart by this beam of light. Yi Fei did not see how Zhang Xiu released the saber. He only saw the flash of the saber light, and then he felt his consciousness gradually fading away. Puff! Yi Fei was cut from the middle. Blood spurted out from the inside due to the pressure. Puff, puff, puff. Blood splattered on the arena, still warm. And the corpse began to turn cold. Dead, Dead, dead? Puff. The corpse fell to the ground, split into two halves. What? Gu Qian suddenly opened his eyes wide, looking at Yi Fei's corpse on the arena. His face became extremely ugly, and his whole body began to tremble. You dare to disobey my order? Chapter 523. Gu Qian's chest seemed to be burned by a flame. Gu Qian's whole body trembled violently. He looked at Zhang Xiu as if he wanted to eat him. Zhang Xiu was challenging him and counterattacking him. Killing Yi Fei with one slash was like a slap to his face. Killed directly? Instant kill. Gu Qian had just said that if Zhang Xiu could cut him, he would lose. As a result, Zhang Xiu directly killed him with one slash. The bloody corpse no longer breathed. While shocking everyone, they also felt the horror of Zhang Xiu. Qin Qing and her maid were dumbfounded. Being able to kill the opponent in one slash was enough to shock people, not to mention that there was also a layer of Gu Qian's bullying and oppression. This was not only killing, but also killing for Gu Qian to see. What is he doing? Is he declaring war on Gu Qian? Not to mention that Gu Qian was Elder Gu's son, he was also a successor disciple. He was definitely not someone a new disciple like Zhang Xiu could compare to. If Gu Qian really wanted to take his life, it would be as easy as crushing an ant. Yi Fei's eyes were still bulging on the ground. He seemed to be unable to believe that Zhang Xiu's slash was so fast and so ruthless that it directly took his life. This match, Zhang Xiu wins. The exam elder frowned and said, although every match could be a life-and-death battle, he really didn't like to kill his own fellow disciples. Zhang Xiu won in this round and can directly enter the inner sect. Congratulations, you have become an inner sect disciple. Wu Zhankui cried out, Brother Zhang, well done. But this fellow's heart was also a bit cold. Zhang Xiu's killing had scared him out of his wits. Originally, he was still thinking about Zhang Xiu's servant girl. He shouted happily, but Shangguan Zhao Rong, Li Chong, and the others were all stunned and pale. It's over. It's really over. Young Master had offended Senior Brother Gu. It was foreseeable that the terrifying Senior Brother Gu would never let Zhang Xiu go. He might not be able to stay in Tianqing School, or even walk out of Tianqing School alive. Why? Not only Shangguan Zhao Rong and the others, but even Qin Qing in the distance was secretly shaking her head. If he wanted to court death, no one could help him. Zhang Xiu said, Exam Elder, register for the inner sect battle. What? The invigilating elder was stunned. He had just become an inner disciple, yet he was going to participate in the inner disciple competition. The strength of an inner disciple was not comparable to that of an outer disciple. Moreover, those who participated in the inner disciple competition were aiming to become a successor disciple. Their strength was infinitely close to that of a successor disciple, which was the core strength of Tianqing School. The surrounding audience also began to discuss spiritedly. The outer sect battle and the inner sect battle were two entirely different concepts. Nonsense. The invigilating elder's face turned red with anger. What do you think the inner sect tournament is? Was this child's play? Do you think that just because you can enter the inner sect, you dare to challenge those true disciples? Ridiculous. The invigilating elder was quite old. He hated those who were arrogant just because they had a little talent. The inner sect was the hardest to break through. Most of the disciples in Tianqing School were inner sect disciples. The competition was extremely cruel. Many people had been in Tianqing School for thousands of years. For example, this invigilating elder had never been able to break through and become a successor disciple in Tianqing School. Why would a new disciple want to participate in the inner sect battle? There was a ranking in the inner sect. It wasn't that they couldn't participate, but those who had some self-awareness would only have a chance if they were ranked near the top 200. It was also once every 5 years. Moreover, it would be held in the near future. The time would be slightly later than the outer sect battle, so it was just right to stagger. Zhang Xiu said, It seems that the sect doesn't have a rule that disciples who have just entered the inner sect are not allowed to participate in the inner sect battle. You're just an outer sect director responsible for registration. If I tell you to sign up, then sign up. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? You? The invigilating elder was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. Good, good, good. Let's see how you embarrass yourself when the time comes. Zhang Xiu coldly snorted. His eyes swept over and pointed at Gu Qian. Gu Qian, you used your status as an elder's son to force me to deliberately lose the battle. Did you think that I would use it? Hua. Zhang Xiu's words once again stirred up 1,000 waves. Countless people whispered to each other. This is too much. He actually dares to bully a fellow disciple. That's right. He's just relying on his father's status as an elder. Gu Qian did not expect that Zhang Xiu would dare to expose this matter in front of everyone. He was greatly shocked. Facing the crowd, he felt a little guilty. No matter what, this matter was his fault. It should not be exposed. Even if someone secretly knew about it, it would be because of his father, Elder Gu. They would definitely not dare to say anything. However, if it caused public opinion, then the pressure would be great. More importantly, before Gu Qian's warning and bullying could be achieved, Zhang Xiu had killed his opponent in front of everyone and entered the inner sect. This gave him a ruthless slap in the face. Now that he said it out loud, it was even more embarrassing. Gu Qian. Listen to me. Not only will I enter the inner sect, but I will also win the inner sect battle and challenge you. Wash your neck and wait for your death. Hua. Once again, there was an uproar. Too arrogant. Was this a public declaration of war? Gu Qian's face was extremely ugly. The muscles at the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. It was the first time in his life that he was put on the spot. He coldly said, "All right, I'll be waiting for you. Don't disappoint me." After that, he could not stay any longer and turned to leave. Miss, he actually turned against Gu Qian in public and even wants to challenge him. Qin Qing's maidservant's face was filled with disbelief. All these years, they had been harassed by Gu Qian and could only endure it. Qin Qing looked at him and her expression became very strange. Miss? Qin Qing turned and said, "Let's go. He doesn't need our help. Don't ask for a rebuff. Maybe." She paused and her eyes were a little dim. Maybe he would rather die than be humiliated. Zhang Xiu's performance was truly breathtaking, shocking the people around him. If he was given enough time, he might really be able to grow. It wasn't enough for a person to just have talent, they still had to have good fortune and good character. Wasn't it often said that one's character determined one's fate? Given Zhang Xiu's tyrannical character, it would be very difficult for him to walk far. Some people were destined to become tragic characters because they were unwilling to accept their fate. Qin Qing did not think that he could defeat Gu Qian. Even if he won, there was still Elder Gu behind him. That was a celestial king. Zhang Xiu's actions were more like a kind of venting of his unwillingness to accept his death. Let's go. Zhang Xiu turned and left with his maidservant. This matter swept through the entire Tianqing school like a gust of wind. Compared to those fights, this battle with the color of gratitude and resentment and the great disparity in strength was more interesting. Who didn't like to see a weakling being bullied? However, no one was optimistic about Zhang Xiu's chances. If Zhang Xiu wanted to challenge Gu Qian, he first had to stand out in the inner sect. However, to do this, he would need to spend a lot of time. They definitely did not believe that Zhang Xiu could do it. After the outer sect battles, it was time for the inner sect battles. Because of the presence of Zhang Xiu and Yi Fei, Zhang Xiu's area was swept away like a gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves. It only took half a day for it to end. However, many of the other outer sect stations were caught in a stalemate and did not end until 5 days later. 5 days later, it would be the inner sect battles that everyone was looking forward to. The disciples who had been painstakingly preparing for the rankings were already extremely talented. After the incident between Zhang Xiu and Gu Qian broke out, it became even more exciting. Not to mention the ordinary disciples, Even the true disciples, peak masters, and elders showed a certain degree of interest. The news also reached the ears of Gu Qian's father, Gu Deqian. Ing Ho also gave his evaluation of Zhang Xiu. His talent is very shocking. So much so that at a certain moment, Ing Ho felt a familiar aura. He couldn't recall it before, but when this matter spread, especially when he killed Yi Fei on the spot and challenged Gu Qian, he was so direct and domineering. He really resembled that person. If the heavens obstructed him, he would destroy the heavens. If the earth obstructed him, he would stomp on the earth and destroy everything. Does he have other disciples outside? Being the disciple of the sect leader was a supreme honor. Not to mention, with Zhang Luoxia's high standards, how many people in the entire immortal martial continent would be able to enter his eyes? The time isn't right either. From Zhang Xiu's fate wheel, he is indeed only in his 20s. There's no overlap in time. If it was just inheritance, cultivation wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. He had so many disciples, but there wasn't a second one. It was impossible for a single one to appear and replicate his previous path. Coincidence? Maybe, during the inner sect battles, he will be taught a lesson. Chapter 524. There were 10 disciples in the inner sect, the so-called 10 seeds. They were ranked in the top 10 of the inner sect. Each one of them was not only famous in Tianqing school, but they were also well known outside. Every single one of them was far stronger than ordinary disciples. To be able to stand above others in the Sky Motion sect, they were all outstanding geniuses. Even so, there was still a huge gap between them and true disciples. It was said that the weakest of the 10 disciples had reached the middle level of Celestial Immortal, and the few who were ranked higher were even upper-level Celestial Immortals. But if they were not favored by the Master, they still had to wait. Of course, those who won in the inner sect were qualified to challenge true disciples and win a chance for themselves. Usually, if they could win against true disciples, those high and mighty elders would not turn a blind eye to it. It could be seen that Zhang Xiu was still far from the top strength of the inner sect. He's only at the early stage of lower Celestial Immortal. This was what Zhang Xiu registered when he entered the sect. He wants to challenge true disciples? In your dreams. Zhang Xiu took time to go to the inner sect. He was now a somewhat famous madman in the sect. He dared to argue with anyone and was ruthless. Some of the deacons in the inner sect were also afraid of him and did not dare to make things difficult for him. Junior brother Jiang is here to collect resources? Zhang Xiu said, yes, last month and this month. The deacon said with some difficulty, Junior brother Jiang, you were still in the outer sect last month. You should go to the outer sect to collect resources. I can only give you 1 month's worth of resources. Zhang Xiu said, that's why I didn't collect them last month. I kept them until now. This, Zhang Xiu said, is there a problem? Don't you want to make things difficult for me? Make things difficult? The deacon looked bitter. You even dared to kick Elder Gu's son down the mountain and shamelessly told him to wash his neck and wait for death. Who in the inner sect would dare to provoke you? Junior brother Jiang is joking. Zhang Xiu said, then don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and give me the things. Don't waste my time. Left with no choice, the deacon could only suffer in silence and give 2 sets of resources to Zhang Xiu. When Zhang Xiu walked out of the door with the resources, he spat at his back. Let's see how long you can be arrogant. Back home, Zhang Xiu called in Li Chang and a group of maidservants. Zhang Xiu gestured for them to take a seat. He pointed at the resources on the table and said, these are the resources for the next 2 months. I've divided them into 4 portions. You can take them according to the instructions on the table. Young master. Everyone present was very surprised. Zhang Xiu was actually distributing resources to them. Zhang Xiu was currently in need of resources to break through to the next realm, but he was still distributing them to them? Young master, we're not in a hurry, Zhang Xiu said. Then do you think I'm lacking something like that? Everyone at the scene fell silent. Zhao Rong, every month from now on, you will distribute the resources to everyone according to this ratio. Zhang Xiu was a tyrant, but he was not stingy. As an earthling, he knew best that money could make the world go round. He had never been stingy to his followers. However, there were some things, such as the sex cultivation methods, that he would adhere to. This was the rule left behind by his master. "Thank you, young master," Zhang Xiu said. "From today onwards, I will be in seclusion for a period of time. During this time, I will not see anyone. Of course, I will not be at home. I will be going out." If he was in seclusion at home, the strength of these few servants would not be able to protect him at all. In order to avoid an accident like when he was in the Zhang family of the Jialan dynasty, he planned to go to a secret place. In the last growth path, he had developed many such places. At almost every stage, he had experienced life and death and had such secret cultivation places. Moreover, they were all in the Qianqing school. The secret place in his heart was a place in the middle 3 peaks. If he went to the upper 3 peaks, he would definitely be discovered. He could only settle for the second best and go to the middle 3 peaks. Late that night, the full moon hung high in the sky. Zhang Xiu directly flew out from the edge of the cliff and blended into the dark night. Last time was too short. Although Zhang Xiu had refined the karmic fire, he did not completely absorb the enormous heavenly fire precepts within. The great god sealing technique secret method could allow him to surpass other god cultivation methods, but ultimately, he could not grasp it in one go. He quietly went up a mountain peak and circled around to the back. It was night and very quiet. There were no traces of people at all except for the sound of some birds. After circling around the mountain range, he entered a canyon. The scene of him cultivating here in the past appeared in Zhang Xiu's mind. This time, his cultivation speed was more than 10 times faster than the last time. This was partly because he had changed to a god cultivation method, but more importantly, it was because of the past cultivation experiences in his mind. On Zhang Xiu's third divine mark diagram, a third stroke had appeared, and the outline of the fourth had already appeared. He was about to break through. If he broke through again, he would break through to become a lower divine god. It was not difficult to break through a small realm. As long as he had enough time, resources, and talent, he would definitely be able to break through. However, what followed next was to become a middle divine god. Zhang Xiu's eyesight and combat experience allowed him to ignore the gap between any small realms. However, if this gap were to expand to a large realm, then he would be somewhat helpless. No matter how good a baby's combat skills were, he would not be able to defeat a powerless woman. In the face of such a huge gap in strength, any combat skills would pale in comparison. Therefore, if Zhang Xiu wanted to win the intersect battle, there was a big prerequisite, and that was that he had to break through to become a middle divine god. There were many intersect combatants, and they were the most numerous in the Qianqing school. Thus, the ranking matches between them would last for a very long time. If Zhang Xiu made the best use of his time, he would still have a chance to become a middle divine god before the final seeding match. Soon, Zhang Xiu entered a state of cultivation and meditation. The flames that he had refined slowly appeared above his head. The flames flickered, illuminating the cave and emitting heat. The heavenly fire precept was a powerful precept, which was also the great way of heavenly fire. Although there were many differences between them, they generally led to the same destination. With the previous enlightenment, his cultivation this time was much faster. Not long after, the flames enveloped Zhang Xiu's entire body. It was as if his entire body was burning. Suddenly, Zhang Xiu felt that something was wrong. It was that strange divine light of destiny that was much brighter than before. Suddenly, an image appeared in his mind. He was cultivating in the cave when footsteps came from outside. The two people were originally talking outside. "You were also involved in what happened back then? Now you're telling me this?" The voice was a little familiar, but Zhang Xiu could not remember where. Moreover, the two auras were very powerful. They seemed to be immortal kings. "Don't scare yourself. He died a long time ago. I saw it with my own eyes. Could it be his disciple? Are you stupid? Even if it was his disciple, where would he find such a talented one? That kid is only in his 20s. He was just born more than 30 years after Zhang Luoxia died. How could it be his disciple? This image flashed in his mind. Zhang Xiu was shocked. They're talking about me. Who said they saw me die with their own eyes? Zhang Xiu really wanted to see who the person who said they saw him die with their own eyes was. As long as he saw him, that person would be a great accomplice of the Ji Dao sect's plot to usurp the throne. He would be Zhang Xiu's great enemy. However, these were all the sudden flashes of the divine light of destiny. They were not here yet. In fact, they should be here soon. His lesser destiny technique could not see too far away. If Zhang Xiu stayed here, he would naturally be able to see the other party and see who the other party was. However, he himself would definitely fall into a situation where there was a slim chance of survival. The other party, regardless of whether he was Zhang Luoxia or not, could possibly kill him to silence him. With the ability of an immortal king, it was impossible for Zhang Xiu to hide at all. Hence, he had to leave now. Otherwise, there would be no more chances. He did not hesitate. He rushed out of the cave at the first moment and flew toward the forest in the distance. However, his heart was pounding. He tried hard to recall that person's voice. First of all, it was a man. Moreover, it had to be an immortal king. Since he appeared here, it meant that he was not in his own dojo. However, Zhang Xiu was not qualified to visit an immortal king now. Otherwise, it would be easy to find out who was in the sect and not in the dojo. Who is it? Who could it be? Zhang Xiu was burning with anger. He actually said that he saw him die with his own eyes. He really could not believe that someone in the sect would betray him like this. Zhang Xiu firmly remembered this voice. He did not know who it was in the past, but the next time he heard it, he felt that he was 70% to 80% sure that he would recognize it. Chapter 525. After escaping from that secret place, Zhang Xiu didn't give up on cultivating in seclusion. Instead, he became more anxious. He realized that he couldn't remember where he was or what he was doing before Chang Lingsu used the Great Fate. In other words, part of his memory was missing. Of course, he had realized this problem before, but he ignored it. Now, he felt that this missing memory might play a vital role in helping him figure out why the position of the faction master had been taken by someone else. What happened to the missing memory? Although the Qianqing school wasn't the ruler of the spiritual state, only one or two factions were on par with it. Of the hundreds of dynasties in the spiritual state, half of them were subsidiaries of the Qianqing school, and most of the resources of the Qianqing school were tributes from these subordinate factions. One could imagine how respected the position of the faction master of the Qianqing school was. Even an emperor's daily life was recorded, let alone the faction master of the Qianqing school. In the past, Zhang Xiu's words and actions were recorded. That was more than 50 years ago, less than 60 years ago. If the Ji Daoist sect hadn't deliberately destroyed it, they should have been able to find some clues. But no matter what the reason was, the position of sect master had already been taken away. Even if Zhang Xiu found evidence to prove that the Ji Dao sect had conspired to take away his position, it was far from enough. If he wanted to take it back, there was a big prerequisite. He had to recover his cultivation base and return to his peak. Slowly, his thoughts returned to the state of cultivation. After entering the late stage of the lower heaven god realm, he had broken through the limits of his realm, and his soul could be strengthened again. The godly soul elixir was too slow, so he used the tipping soul elixir again. On the other hand, he used the karmic fire to comprehend the law of heavenly fire contained in it. Once again, he used it for both purposes. Fire had the Tao of speed, the Tao of slowness, the Tao of formlessness, and so on. The Tao of swiftness in the great Tao of heaven fire was the magical law of swiftness among god cultivators. Once one understood it, one's godhood would grow stronger, and one's understanding of the characteristics of fire would be complete. Most people would only be able to comprehend the great Tao slowly after reaching a higher realm. Those at a lower realm would not be able to comprehend it at all. However, Zhang Xiu was a freak. His comprehension of nomological laws was faster than his cultivation level. When an ordinary person cultivated a certain great Tao to the point where it was close to being complete, they would be almost at the upper celestial immortal realm. Above that would be the great celestial immortal realm, and the great celestial immortal realm was to fuse a certain great Tao into one and reach the great perfection realm. From then on, he would be the fire, and the fire would be him. Therefore, great celestial immortals were on another level. Above that would be the celestial king realm, who could discover the existence of energy even finer than fire. There was a huge difference between God cultivators and immortals, especially in the divine body. Zhang Xiu's current skeletal structure was completely different from that of immortals. Every time he advanced, he would evolve as a God cultivator. His body would undergo an obvious earth-shattering change. His outer appearance would not change, but there would be a lot more bones inside. This would allow his body to have greater possibilities and tolerance. The blood in his body surged once again, and his godhood erupted with intense light. His entire body emitted a colorful light. At this moment, Zhang Xiu realized that he might be about to break through. The peak of lower celestial immortal realm was right in front of him. Boom! The barrier in his body was broken, and his blood exploded. His entire body was like the Big Bang. Many parts of his body underwent another huge change. His godhood was clearly strengthened, and his soul was also strengthened. Peak of lower celestial immortal realm. Suddenly, Zhang Xiu's third divine rune pattern had another divine rune added. Just like the first divine rune, the Protoss talent would only appear when the divine rune pattern was completed. The first Protoss talent was the first sound of heaven and earth. The second Protoss talent was the world shroud. The third, from the previous development pattern, each talent was stronger than the previous one. Zhang Xiu was looking forward to what kind of Protoss talent would appear next. The world shroud was already heaven-defying. If the third Protoss talent was even more abnormal than the world shroud, then it would really be abnormal. He didn't know how long he had been in seclusion this time. Of course, he still had to continue. Only when he reached the middle level of Celestial Immortal would he have a chance to compete. But before that, he had to make a trip back. At least he would know the approximate time. He didn't want to miss the day of the inner sect battle. Young Master. Shangguan Zhaorong was pleasantly surprised to see Zhang Xiu. You're out of seclusion? She couldn't tell if Zhang Xiu had a breakthrough, but it seemed like Zhang Xiu's appearance had changed once again. But it wasn't as big as the change from Earth God to Celestial God. This could only be considered a minor adjustment. Big Brother Li went to watch the inner sect battle. Li Chong was a cultivator. Of course, he wouldn't miss the inner sect battle. Not to mention the inner sect battle, even the outer sect battle was a once-in-a-lifetime battle in the Jialan dynasty. Watching the battle would give him a lot of benefits. Did anyone come in the past 2 days? Shangguan Zhaorong said, "Oh right, Elder Lu came. He was the one who brought us here, Elder Lu Chongkong. I said that young master was in seclusion, so he left." Lu Chongkong. Zhang Xiu was secretly puzzled. When he heard the conversation between the two people on the middle 3 peaks, he thought that someone would come to find him, or an elder who was interested in him. The real power center of the Qianqing school didn't seem to pay too much attention to his appearance, nor did it cause any waves. Compared to the outer sect and inner sect, these people lived at the bottom of the Qianqing school, just like how an emperor would care so much about the people below. In the Qianqing school, the power struggle was more complicated than that of a dynasty. There were traditional families and new families. In the past, Zhang Xiu was able to climb up because he had paid the price of countless people's lives. Zhang Xiu wanted to investigate things, so he had to first return to the core circle and see the state of the people inside. Not to mention other things, he didn't know the recent situation of his disciples. They would never have thought that their master would come back and even change his appearance. However, Zhang Xiu was also prepared for the worst in his heart. Those disciples of his were very likely to have already been killed. The possibility of this was very high. The Ji Dao sect was a rebellion, not a normal transfer. How could someone with a guilty conscience leave Zhang Xiu's disciples alive? Did he say anything? Shangguan Zhaorong said, Elder Lu said that what he said to you before still counts. Zhang Xiu thought about it. Lu Chongkong seemed to have told him that if he was in trouble, he could look for him. Could it be that he heard about the matter between him and Gu Qian and wanted to help? The corner of his mouth raised in a strange expression. No one would take the initiative to say that they would help him. There was no living Lei Feng in the immortal martial continent. Even if Lu Chongkong really wanted to help Zhang Xiu, he would have to wait until Zhang Xiu came to beg him before he could help. Taking the initiative. Was it really because he cherished talent? Or was there another reason? Zhang Xiu thought in his heart. Even if he looked like Zhang Luoxia should be dead in their eyes. Not only that, he was a divine cultivator and a saber cultivator. No matter what, there was no reason to be associated with him. Alright, how's the inner sect competition? The inner sect competition was based on points. In other words, if one wanted to challenge a true disciple, other than winning, they had to fight more battles. At the level of the inner sect, there were many immortal martial arts that countered each other. If one won a battle, they would gain 2 points, and if one lost, 1 point would be deducted. At that time, the one with the highest points would be able to challenge a true disciple. Zhang Xiu remembered that the cutoff was 70+ points. Of course, this wasn't safe. The situation was different every time, just like the college entrance exam. The admission points were different every year. Young master wants to go? Let's go. At the location of the inner sect competition, Zhang Xiu's appearance caused quite a commotion. This person who had disappeared for more than 10 days finally reappeared. Zhang Xiu is coming out. He finally went down the stage. Countless pairs of eyes stared at him. All of them were inner sect disciples, and all of them had the qualifications to fight against Zhang Xiu. Who's going to be the vanguard? From afar, a group of people walked over. It was Gu Qian's group. Gu Qian's expression was gloomy. Zhang Xiu, you finally showed yourself. Zhang Xiu's eyes were indifferent. Right now, he only had the strength of a peak-stage lesser heavenly deity. If even a mid-stage heavenly deity came to challenge him, he would definitely lose. Gu Qian would definitely send a mid-stage heavenly deity to fight against Zhang Xiu. At that time, Zhang Xiu would lose again and again, falling to the bottom. Go up the stage and play. Let's talk about it after we pass the inner sect. Chapter 526. Let me see, what qualifications do you have to challenge me? Gu Qian looked at Zhang Xiu mockingly. The inner sect members of the Gu family were enough to consign Zhang Xiu to eternal damnation. Zhang Xiu was very outstanding and monstrous, and everyone saw it. However, no matter how outstanding a person was, it was impossible to cross the chasm of a large realm. Of course, Gu Qian understood this. It was not difficult to find a dozen or 20 middle-level celestial immortals in the inner sect. Just the number of people could overwhelm Zhang Xiu. Brat, let's see how arrogant you can be. Some of his underlings beside him were very unhappy with Zhang Xiu. One of them flew towards the floating peak, and it seemed like he wanted to challenge Zhang Xiu. Junior brother Zhang, let's fight. But don't worry, there's no need to be afraid. I won't kill you. There are people waiting in line behind you. Looking around, there were more than 10 people gathered around Gu Qian. Zhang Xiu glanced around. They were all inner sect disciples, and they were all middle-level celestial immortals. Shangguan Zhaorong shrank behind Zhang Xiu in fear. Young master. Zhang Xiu did not move, and his gaze was indifferent. The long sword in that person's hand shook, and a sharp airflow burst out from his body. At the same time, the sword light became incomparably bright, and the airflow rendered the invisible supernatural power into a thick light, covering the flowing light on the sword. Elegy of the Swordsman. Zhang Xiu's expression was unusually cold. This sword technique was not passed down by the ancestors of Qianqing School, but a set of sword techniques that he comprehended when Zhang Luoxia fought his way out of the inner sect. Later, everyone agreed that this sword technique was very suitable for sword cultivators, and it was the foundation for the derivation of sword intent. Now, someone was using the sword technique he created to fight against him. Come up. The bright light accompanied by the sword aura swept over. He was so anxious that before Zhang Xiu decided to go on stage, he directly attacked Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu's eyes flashed with a strong light, and it was as if two rays of sword aura tore through the sky. Break! The sound of a saber rang out from his body. Saber intent. His entire body is emanating saber intent. How is this possible? Releasing saber intent without drawing the saber was an extremely high level of saber cultivation. To achieve this, one had to fuse the saber intent with their body to achieve the so-called unity of the saber and man, forming an extremely powerful force. Intent achieved momentum, and the so-called momentum was actually an aura field. This was just like a person. There was a huge difference between a person's chi field and a person's chi field. It was the same for saber and sword cultivators. It was extremely difficult to comprehend this point. The chi field was the foundation of the domain. There were only a few people in the inner sect who could do this. Bang! The sword radiance collided with the saber intent. His opponent had the upper hand in terms of overall level, while Zhang Xiu had the upper hand in terms of sword cultivation. The two of them clashed, and light exploded like two missiles colliding. The sky rumbled and shook. Zhang Xiu, come up here if you have the guts, the other party clamored. As far as he was concerned, all of Zhang Xiu's skills and abilities paled in comparison to the advantage of a higher realm. Don't be in such a hurry to die. Zhang Xiu's gaze coldly swept across. Gu Qian, you're afraid, so you found a few random people to fight for you? True disciple. He was extremely disdainful. As a true disciple, he actually did not have the courage to face a new disciple. Ridiculous. Gu Qian's expression was cold as he looked straight at Zhang Xiu. This brat was not only vicious, but also sharp-tongued. Brat, there's no use in hiding. Do you think you can hide forever just because you can hide once? Even if you can't break out of the inner sect battle, I will still make you wish you were dead. I said before that if you don't listen, I will cut off your hand. You better think carefully. Left hand or right hand? Zhang Xiu ignored him and left with Shangguan Zhao Rong. Senior Gu, are we just going to let him leave like this? Gu Qian said, don't worry. He's dead for sure. The inner sect battle is about to end. If we touch him now, he will think that I'm afraid of him. Do you think he can suddenly become a middle immortal? He could ignore what the people below said, but the news had already spread among the true disciples. He did not want to lose face in his own circle. He has to come down and compete. But that person's gaze fell on the place where the sword light and blade intent collided. The sword light had already dissipated, but the blade intent still had some power left in the void. He secretly made up his mind that he must comprehend his own man and sword realm of sword intent. In fact, when he reached this step, he had spent many years, but he didn't even touch the surface. Of course, he had seen the sword intent domain displayed by the true disciples before. The power that cut through the void left a deep impression on him. But this was the first time he faced it himself, and the one who attacked was a person whose realm was lower than his. Sword intent that fused with sword chi, that was the true sword art. Why can't I comprehend it? He was very unhappy. He felt that the heavens were unfair. If the true disciples could comprehend it, then so be it. But that kid, what did he have? A saber cultivator and a sword cultivator were, of course, different. At the very least, the heaven and earth were completely different. However, there were also similarities. At a lower level, in a lightless world, they were very similar to each other to a certain extent. Therefore, Zhang Xiu did not spend too much time comprehending the saber will of the unity of man and saber, because he had cultivated it once before. Elder Lu. Zhang Xiu was watching the battle inside. He wanted to show his face in front of the public, but he did not expect to meet Lu Chongkong. Lu Chongkong had come to look for him before. Logically speaking, even if Zhang Xiu did not need his help, he should still go and meet him. But his time was limited. He was going to go into seclusion after going around, but he did not expect to meet Lu Chongkong here. But this was too much of a coincidence. I was going to visit the elder later. I didn't expect to meet you here. Lu Chongkong looked at Zhang Xiu, and his eyes flashed with surprise. Others could not see through Zhang Xiu's realm, but Lu Chongkong naturally saw through it at a glance. Compared to when he first went to Qianqing school, Zhang Xiu had advanced by 2 small realms. In less than 2 months, he had advanced by 2 small realms. Mother ****, this is practically flying. One had to know that even Zhang Luoxia himself did not have such speed. You advanced. Zhang Xiu nodded slightly. Yes. Not bad at all. Lu Chongkong was indeed shocked. Such speed was truly too shocking. It seems that the huge pressure isn't always a bad thing. This immortal has heard about your matter. Zhang Xiu said, thank you for your concern. Lu Chongkong smiled. Zhang Luoxia was like this in the past. The more you pressured him, the faster he advanced, and the stronger he bounced back. They were too similar. You remind me of someone? Zhang Xiu asked. Who? Lu Chongkong stared at Zhang Xiu's face and said deeply, the former sect leader, Zhang Luoxia. Boom! Zhang Xiu's whole body trembled. He knew that Lu Chongkong must have suspected something. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to look for him. It was not a coincidence that they met here. Is it? Zhang Xiu's face flashed unnaturally. He clenched his fists. That's an honor. Sect leader Zhang is a role model for my generation. But I heard that he has fallen. Zhang Xiu was not an ordinary person. Under such a tense situation where his identity could be exposed at any time, not only did he not shrink back, he did not change the topic. Instead, he faced it directly and seemed very calm. Lu Chongkong said, yes, I heard that he has fallen. Heard? Zhang Xiu felt strange. Elder Lu, did you only hear it from others? Did you not see it with your own eyes? Lu Chongkong said, yes, when sect leader Zhang was in trouble, I was not there. Zhang Xiu really wanted to ask him, who did you hear it from? But he knew that if he asked this question, it would be asking for trouble. So, he did not answer. Some people he would say it himself out of habit. Zhang Xiu was right. Lu Chongkong said, this matter is very complicated. Some say that it was an internal setup, some say that he was killed by an outsider. But it seems more like a collusion, Zhang Xiu said. There are people in the sect who colluded with outsiders to frame their own sect leader. It can't be. It can't be. Lu Chongkong's eyes darkened. He seemed to be very dissatisfied with Zhang Xiu's words because he lowered his head and avoided Zhang Xiu's gaze. Zhang Xiu could not see his expression clearly. Lu Chongkong's voice sounded in his ears again. You are too young and do not know the complexity of the world. The power struggle in Qianqing school is much more complicated than that in the imperial court. Just like how sect leader Ji married a disciple of the Taihua sect. The impact is much greater than the marriage between the imperial court and the imperial court. Zhang Xiu was stunned. Sect leader Ji married a disciple of the Taihua sect? Just as he was in a daze, Lu Chongkong's eyes inadvertently swept across Zhang Xiu's face. Chapter 527. Lu Chongkong took in the surprise and shock on Zhang Xiu's face. He pondered for a moment. Zhang Xiu's expression did not match his status. It seems like you haven't heard of it. Zhang Xiu shook his head. The higher-ups of the sect are far beyond the reach of inner disciples like me. The reason why he was stunned was mostly because of anger. Taihua sect and Qianqing school were on the same level as each other. The relationship between the two sects was not harmonious. Although they were not mortal enemies, there was still friction from time to time. Especially when Zhang Luoxia was in power, the the relationship between him and Taihua sect was the most tense. Zhang Xiu had fought with Taihua sect's leader several times. They regarded each other as the greatest enemy of their lives. However, as the leader of Ji Dao sect, he married a disciple of Taihua sect. Putting aside the relationship between the two sects, Zhang Xiu's seniority was lower than Taihua sect's. As the leader of Tianqing school, he became Zhang Xiu's junior. Therefore, the entire Tianqing school was inferior to Taihua sect. How could Zhang Xiu tolerate such humiliation? That's true. It was normal for Zhang Xiu to not know about it. After all, it was a matter of the higher-ups. However, Zhang Xiu's shock and anger were not normal. This was not how he should behave. Let's find a place to sit down and have a cup of spiritual tea. Lu Chongkong surprisingly sent out an invitation. An elder inviting an ordinary disciple for tea was something that had never happened before. Unless the disciple had flirted with the elder's daughter and made the elder's daughter want to die, the elder would only invite him for tea if he had no choice. However, Lu Chongkong did not have a daughter. Zhang Xiu did not flirt with the elder's daughter. This was a bit strange. Zhang Xiu had a feeling that Lu Chongkong's suspicion towards him had deepened. Perhaps he had accidentally fallen into Lu Chongkong's trap during the conversation just now, which made Lu Chongkong even more suspicious. Inviting him for tea might reveal some information about Zhang Luoxia, but it would also increase the risk of him being exposed. Zhang Xiu wasn't familiar with Lu Chongkong, so he didn't know where he stood. If he was the Ji Dao sect's lackey, then wouldn't he be delivering himself to their doorstep? I'm sorry, Elder Lu. The inner sect battles are intense, and I need to make the best use of my time to cultivate. I think you should understand my current situation. Zhang Xiu refused. A look of surprise flashed across Lu Chongkong's face. He smiled and said, "You can't really be thinking that you can make a breakthrough to become a middle heavenly god in just a month's time." Without becoming a middle heavenly deity, there was no way to break through from the inner court. Zhang Xiu said, "How do you know if you don't try? What if you succeed?" Success. Lu Chongkong admired Zhang Xiu's confident aura. It was as if no problem could stop him. Even in the face of such a big predicament, he was still calm and collected. Fine. Even if you succeed, become a middle heavenly god, and win the inner sect battles, so what? You have to face Gu Qian, a true disciple. Fine. Even if you win against Gu Qian, there is still Gu Daqian behind him. Even if you win against Gu Daqian, there is still the Ji Dao sect behind him. Don't tell me you want to become enemies with the entire Tianqing school? Let's go have some tea. Maybe we'll find a solution. Lu Chongkong might really be able to help Zhang Xiu. After all, the conflict between children was nothing in the eyes of adults. However, Zhang Xiu felt that Lu Chongkong was too proactive. His initiative was too abnormal. No matter what, I must stand in front of Gu Qian. I must make him pay the price for bullying me. That's right. I, Zhang Xiu, only have one life, but Gu Daqian also only has one son. Lu Chongkong was shocked. His gaze fell on Zhang Xiu's face and couldn't move away. The person in front of him was just a small inner disciple, but at this moment, he felt a trace of fear. Sorry. Zhang Xiu walked past him. Shangguan Zhao Rong followed behind him. She didn't dare to make a sound. She stared at Zhang Xiu's back and was a little absent-minded. She had never seen a boy like Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu looked at the rankings of the major venues and roughly estimated that there should be 1.5 months left. In other words, he must reach the middle immortal level in 1.5 months. Young master, Zhang Xiu said, what is it? Shangguan Zhao Rong said, didn't young master say that you want to take Zhao Rong to do a physique test? Why do you suddenly want to do it? Shangguan Zhao Rong said, I want to cultivate. Zhang Xiu stopped in his tracks. He remembered that he said that he wouldn't support Shangguan Zhao Rong to cultivate. Although they were given resources, those resources could all be exchanged for money. Why? Shangguan Zhao Rong said seriously, I want to protect young master. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiu raised his head and laughed. What a joke, what a joke. The dignified Tianqing school's sect master needed a servant girl to protect him. He knew that Shangguan Zhao Rong's intentions were good, but to pity a strong person, that was the greatest insult to him. You think you can protect me? Shangguan Zhao Rong said, yes, even if Zhao Rong does a physique test, her talent should be far from young master's. Young master is the stars in the sky, Zhao Rong is just the mud on the ground, but it's always good to have a bit of cultivation, even if I have the chance to block a sword for young master in the future. Zhang Xiu stopped laughing and looked at the serious look on Shangguan Zhao Rong's beautiful face, especially the determination in her black and shiny eyes. He didn't doubt that Shangguan Zhao Rong was sincere at this moment. Perhaps he touched one of her emotions and moved her, but people change. How many people changed from a blank sheet of paper to darkness? Moreover, the more soft-hearted a person was, once they became ruthless, they would be darker than anything else. He would rather Shangguan Zhao Rong be an ordinary servant girl. He didn't need her to do anything for him, as long as she took care of his daily life, that was enough. Good. But Zhang Xiu didn't refuse, because Zhang Xiu knew that he couldn't stop it. He also didn't want to control Shangguan Zhao Rong's fate. It's behind that door. Zhang Xiu brought him to a place in the lower 3 peaks. Here, one could test one's talent and physique. Many disciples from big clans outside of the Sky Motion sect would come here to take the test. They only needed to spend a little money to do so. You can go in. Shangguan Zhao Rong nervously asked, young master won't accompany me in. Zhang Xiu shook his head and said, it's only a test of talent. After you go in, give her some spirit stones and the person inside will help you test. But remember, don't tell her your name or where you're from. Yes. Then young master, what about you? Everything here was the same as before, with an antique atmosphere. It should be autumn soon, and because of the location, the leaves had already turned yellow. When the wind blew, the ground was covered in fallen leaves. Zhang Xiu stepped on the bluestone bricks, the fallen leaves rolling around his feet. I'll wait for you outside. In the past, Shizuan had also accompanied him like this. Floating for more than 3,000 years, like a sinner, like a bubble, like a flash of lightning, like an old tree in front of the courtyard, 1,000-year-old Xiao Xiao, 10,000-year-old Xiao Xiao, come true, go time and space, it should be as it is. After a long time, the sound of footsteps came from behind him. Young master. Zhang Xiu turned around and saw Shangguan Zhao Rong's face. He knew in his heart that it should be a special physique, otherwise she wouldn't be happy. But in the past, when Shizuan turned around, what he saw was a dejected Zhang Xiu. But in the end, he didn't disappoint him, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously rose into a smile. Before he could speak, Shangguan Zhao Rong smiled and said, young master, so you know how to smile. You look really good when you smile. Zhang Xiu immediately retracted his smile and asked, how was the test? Shangguan Zhao Rong said, the person who tested me said that I had a special physique, but he said that he didn't know what kind of special physique it was. It should be very ancient, and he wanted to check some ancient books. He told me to wait at the door for a while. In the immortal martial continent, there was a saying that the more ancient a special physique was, the more heaven-defying it was. If it was so ancient that even the person who tested it had to look through ancient books, then it must be very ancient. No wonder Shangguan Zhao Rong was so happy. But soon after, the sound of footsteps came from inside. It was a middle-aged man. Zhang Xiu asked, was he the one who tested me? Yes. Shangguan Zhao Rong wanted to ask him what kind of special physique she had, and whether or not he found it. But from behind, a sharp blade flashed and the person in front of her stopped in his tracks, and then fell into a pool of blood. Young master, why did you kill him? Zhang Xiu said, he was lying to you. If he didn't know what kind of special physique you had, how would he know that you had a special physique? Chapter 528. Shangguan Zhao Rong was suddenly enlightened, but another question followed. Even if she had a special physique, why would he lie to her? What good would it do him to lie to me? Zhang Xiu said, it's the same everywhere. Haven't you seen the Jia Lan dynasty abducting girls? Some girls have physiques that are suitable to be used as cultivation furnaces. If I'm not wrong, you should be one of them. Before this matter broke out, Jiang Xiu had already made this judgment. Wu Zhankue had used 10 life pills to exchange for a maid. On the surface, it seemed like he was infatuated with Shangguan Zhao Rong's looks, but Jiang Xiu directly told him otherwise. What happened now proved his judgment right. Let's go. Bringing Jiang Xiu with him, he used an escape technique to leave. Jiang Xiu wasn't afraid of trouble, but if Shangguan Zhao Rong was targeted, there would be trouble. He couldn't always keep her by his side, but if he allowed her to be snatched away and turned into a cultivation tool, he wouldn't sit idly by. Young master, does Zhao Rong really have a special physique? Jiang Xiu nodded and said, that should be right, but don't mention this to anyone. Otherwise, I don't need to tell you what fate will be like. Shangguan Zhao Rong's expression was a bit nervous, but she wasn't that afraid. She wasn't a flower in a greenhouse. Her family had suffered a sudden change when she was young, and she grew up in a palace where people's hearts were complicated. She had always been the target of men's competition and had seen life and death, so she could face this kind of environment. Humans were strange creatures. They could survive in very bad situations. For example, in a country at war, their doors could be broken down at any time, and they didn't even know when a grenade would be thrown in. However, they could also choose to commit suicide because they couldn't live in a very comfortable and happy environment. That night, Jiang Xiu left his residence once again and flew over the cliff, flying towards the distant mountains. He then circled around the peaks and went to the middle 3 peaks. He wanted to go into seclusion again. For many people with limited talent, it would take hundreds of years or even a lifetime to go from lower heavenly god to middle heavenly god. However, for Jiang Xiu, it wasn't a problem. He had all the conditions to break through, the only problem was time. Would he be able to complete his breakthrough in 1.5 months and make it in time for the inner court battle? Jiang Xiu's god cultivation technique was the outline of all god cultivation techniques and the beginning of everything. It could be said that it was the best god cultivation technique. It was recorded on the creation jade butterfly that was created by the heavens and earth. There definitely wouldn't be a freak who could create a god cultivation technique that was more awesome than the great god sealing art on the creation jade butterfly. However, there was still a long way to go before he could truly cultivate the great god sealing technique. As for the great god sealing technique, the most unique thing about it was that it could refine oneself into a creation divine weapon. Jiang Xiu had already achieved the fusion of himself with the saber pellet, which was the so-called fusion of man and saber. The man was the saber, and the saber was the man. However, this was only the first step in a long journey. In other words, Jiang Xiu had touched the threshold of the so-called heavenly saber law. Like other laws, many small laws contained in the heavenly saber had yet to be mastered, not even one. Jiang Xiu didn't know how many saber paths there were. Everyone in the Qianqing school was a sword cultivator. He was very unique. He was both a god cultivator and a saber cultivator, which was the opposite of the Qianqing school. Therefore, he didn't have a corresponding saber technique. It was no wonder that Lu Chongkong had asked him if he was really willing to go to the Qianqing school. They couldn't teach him, so he had to rely on his own comprehension. However, right now, if he were to comprehend the Saber Tao, it would obviously not be as fast as the ready-made heavenly fire law. He once again took out the flame. The flame was obviously much smaller than before. As Jiang Xiu comprehended the heavenly fire law, he absorbed the power of the flame inside. Naturally, the flame would become smaller and weaker. When Jiang Xiu absorbed all the heavenly fire law contained in it, the hellfire would disappear completely. He had already comprehended the heavenly fire law of speed. Next was the law of explosion. On the other hand, of course, he didn't give up on strengthening his soul. As his cultivation deepened, Jiang Xiu realized an indisputable fact. The soul of a god cultivator was generally stronger than that of an immortal cultivator. This advantage would become more obvious in the later stages. The bigger the godhead, the stronger the soul. At the thought of this, Jiang Xiu wished that he could have an immortal martial art that attacked the soul. If he could master it, it could really be regarded as a trump card. Jiang Xiu remembered that when he was advancing toward the great celestial immortal realm, he had already focused on the cultivation of the soul. If he didn't have a corresponding immortal martial art, he would have to work on medicinal pills and magic weapons. After taking some medicinal pills, there would be a layer of protective medicinal power on the surface of the soul. Some powerful magic weapons also had this effect. Of course, there were also magic weapons that could attack the soul. The Heavenly Execution Token, the keepsake of the Chenqing School's sect master, was a soul defense magic weapon. With that token, he could basically ignore most of the soul-related immortal martial arts. Jiang Xiu hoped very much that the talent he awakened when he evolved to the celestial immortal realm had something to do with the soul. A few days later, Jiang Xiu realized that the speed of his soul strengthening had slowed down significantly. This was also something that Jiang Xiu had expected. The conversion rate of the soul-bending pill had decreased. This was not because Jiang Xiu's talent had decreased, but because Jiang Xiu's soul was getting more and more accustomed to the soul-bending pill. In other words, the body's resistance to the pill had increased, and the medicinal effect had weakened. At this time, the usual solution was to change to another type of medicinal pill. He could only change to the life recovery pill. In the Chenqing School, there was another high-level soul-nourishing medicinal pill called the 10 Souls and 9 Souls pill. Of course, Jiang Xiu knew how to refine that kind of medicinal pill. Its medicinal effect was even better than the soul-bending pill. However, the required materials were extremely difficult to obtain. It was not something that inner sect disciples could use. Only great celestial immortals were qualified to use it. Of course, some people were special cases, such as Gu Qian. After all, he had a good father. He should have taken it before. After changing to the life recovery pill, Jiang Xiu's speed naturally slowed down. He put more effort into comprehending the laws. The breakthrough of a big realm required a strong soul as the foundation. For example, the ascension of an earth god to a celestial god was difficult. However, it was only an increase of a small realm. For example, the ascension of an inferior celestial god to a middle celestial god was not necessary. Comprehending the laws could not only increase one's strength, but it could also strengthen one's soul. It was no wonder that immortals looked down on gods. They felt that god cultivation was simpler and more violent. In addition, their bodies were naturally strong. It was no wonder that immortals sometimes felt that although gods liked to fight and could fight, some were simple-minded and well-developed. After trying the life pill a few times, Jiang Xiu decided to give up and use medicinal pills to nourish the life pill. He wanted to use this experience to strengthen his body. As one's cultivation level increased, one's body would become stronger. However, cultivating the art of god cultivation could also improve one's body. Therefore, he used the grand god-sealing art to cultivate. However, to Jiang Xiu's disappointment, it was not true that one person could do two things. If the soul and the body were separated, one could cultivate the soul and the other could cultivate the body. Both required the body at the same time. It was impossible for the body to circulate two cultivation methods at the same time. He could cultivate the great god-sealing technique and comprehend the heavenly fire law at the same time. This time, Jiang Xiu had to make a choice again. If he reverted to his previous cultivation method, he would not be able to make it in time for the inner sect battle. Therefore, he gave up on comprehending the heavenly fire law and only cultivated the great god-sealing technique. However, the results surprised Jiang Xiu. The speed of the evolution of the divine body was very shocking. This made Jiang Xiu change his cultivation method immediately. He used the evolution of the divine body to promote the advancement of the realm. The godhead and dermic powers might be weaker, but the divine body was strong. The most important thing now was to make it in time for the inner sect battle. Jiang Xiu immediately used a day to refine medicinal pills to strengthen the body. There were more than 3,000 recipes for this kind of medicinal pill in the Chenqing School. Medicinal pills were different, and the human body was different. The same medicinal pill would be effective on him, but it might not be effective on others, unless it was a top-grade immortal pill. However, The resources needed to refine top-grade immortal pills were also top-grade. He did not have them at all. He used his superb alchemy skills to refine more than 10 types of medicinal pills. He tried them one by one. There was such a big difference even when he was an immortal, let alone when he had a divine body. After trying 10 types of medicinal pills, he was satisfied with the Wood King pills effect. The conversion rate was 97%. It could be said that he had absorbed all of it. The absorption rate was also twice as fast as other medicinal pills. His overall cultivation speed had increased by more than 7 times. After taking 2 pills, the effect was reduced by 20%. 3 pills was the limit. Taking 4 pills was not as fast as taking 3 pills. While Jiang Xiu was cultivating in seclusion, the inner sect battle outside was nearing its end. Chapter 529. The inner sect battle was coming to an end, and it was also the most critical moment. 5 years of hard work depended on Jin Chao. The people below were fighting for the right to challenge the true disciples, while the people at the top were fighting for the first place. The first place in the inner sect sounded very impressive. The competition was very fierce, and the spectating disciples were very excited. They all cheered for the people they supported. At this moment, all the people who stayed were strong, and they were fighting to the death. Not far away, the person next to Gu Qian said, "It seems that the kid is going to go missing." Humph. Gu Qian snorted. Another person continued, "Don't tell me you really think that Brat dares to come up and compete, and can really stand in front of senior brother Gu. From the beginning, I didn't believe that Brat was just being stubborn. When the inner sect battle is over, we must catch the kid and teach him a lesson." He looked at Gu Qian and said, "Senior brother Gu, leave it to us. We'll do whatever you say." Gu Qian said, "I said I wanted one of his hands, but now I've changed my mind. One hand is not enough. I'll shatter his godhead, cut off his limbs, and throw him off Tianqing Mountain to feed the dogs." The people in the distance were all focused on the competition. Jiang Xiu hadn't shown up for a long time, and the inner sect battle was very fierce. He had long been forgotten. It's the last round. The first 2 will fight directly. Although there is a gap of more than 20 points between them, one has fought more and the other has fought less. No one has lost, and the winner will be first. It has nothing to do with the points. Qin Qing also waited for a long time, but Jiang Xiu still didn't appear. The maid next to her asked, "Miss, who will win?" Qin Qing said, "Li Yiqing's sword cultivation is not weak, and his sword energy is very powerful. However, it's hard to say if he can beat Chen Yiming. They are both seeded inner sect disciples, and their strength is similar. It's not surprising who will win." She didn't say anything. They are young, and they should look at all the young talents in the spiritual state. They should not just look at our Tianqing school. They should look further and compete for the Azure Spirit list. The maid said, "Just them. Don't forget that the true disciples of our Tianqing school are the core." "You haven't retired yet?" Qin Qing said helplessly, "Right now, a large number of our Tianqing school's disciples on the Azure Spirit leaderboard are about to pass their annual rings. After they retire, the people behind them won't be able to take over. The Azure Spirit leaderboard still needs their support." "Miss, didn't you say that only true disciples can compete for the Blue Spirit?" Qin Qing said, "If nothing goes wrong, these 2 will become true disciples this year. Then they will be able to play for Tianqing School." "Are these 2 people so strong?" Qin Qing then replied, "Their strength is above that of many core disciples. The reason why they didn't become core disciples was because the elders had discovered that these 2 had suppressed the inner sect disciples and became the peerless duo. They had stimulated each other, and had a strong effect on their cultivation. However, if they were to widen the scope of their cultivation, they would have more targets to target. Without this stimulation, their cultivation speed would be greatly reduced." The maidservant was stunned. "These 2 are so powerful?" The maidservant who hadn't paid attention to the inner sanctum was very surprised. These two have occupied the top 2 positions in the inner sect for 7 years. Ah. The maidservant said, no wonder. When I looked at them, I felt that they were very different from the other inner sect disciples. It turns out that they are so strong. The assessment battlefield was very tense. Many disciples were sent over to maintain order and tidy up the arena. Are you ready? Check the barrier again. I don't want to see any accidents. The maidservant exclaimed, we still have to set up a barrier? Is there a need to be so exaggerated? It seemed that even the battles between core disciples were not exaggerated to this extent. Indeed, a layer of spherical light that reflected sunlight could be vaguely seen shrouding the floating peak. It meant that when the battle started, none of the spells would be able to rush outside and hurt the audience. Li Yiqing grinned and said, Chen Yiming, this time, you won't be able to keep your first place. For 7 years, you have been the leader 7 times. But in the last time, which is also the most crucial time, you lost. Won't it be very painful? Chen Yiming's aura was even stronger. It's just the fusion of sword intents. There are many sword cultivators who have comprehended sword intents. Even if I use the secret technique of my hands, I can block them all. He didn't cultivate the way of the sword. He only relied on a pair of loose hands to defeat thousands of sword cultivators in the inner sect. Seeing the 2 core disciples in the arena fight each other, the audience at the side of the arena instantly became excited. Waves of cheers grew louder and louder. Not to mention them, even the exam elders were very excited. This was definitely a duel between core disciples. It might even become the most exciting duel between inner sect disciples. It was said that this duel had attracted the attention of several peak masters and even the elders. Right now, they should be watching this duel from somewhere. Go and inform the exam elders. Chen Yiming's ancient demon loose hands is extremely powerful. Have them reinforce the barrier by another layer to ensure that nothing goes wrong. On a certain mountain peak, an outstanding man stood. His clothes fluttered in the wind and he had a beautiful beard. Looking at him, one would think of a word in one's mind. Immortal. He matched all of a person's fantasies of immortals. Tianqing School's elder, Xiao Ye. Yes. On the side, a man dressed in white said, Elder, you only mentioned Chen Yiming and not Li Yiqing. Do you think Chen Yiming will win? Xiao Ye stroked his beard and said, To tell you the truth, not long ago, I accidentally passed by Immortal Burial Mountain and heard that someone was practicing palm techniques. Every single palm strike contained the power to pierce through mountains and rivers, and the might of the scattered palm strikes was close to the gates of the heavenly Tao. A single palm strike could destroy a mountain, and the strength of that person's strength surprised me greatly. What surprised me even more was that there was a demonic dragon roaring. This child also has a special constitution and bloodline that is different from ordinary people. The man in white smiled faintly. That's unexpected. But then, a strange look flashed in his eyes. As an elder, Xiao Ye had a respected status and was busy with many affairs every day. How could he be so free as to go to Immortal Burial Mountain? That was the place where the Tianqing School's disciples were buried. Of course, there were the spiritual tombs of their ancestors. For immortal cultivators, it was also a place of bad luck. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't go there. It was easy to understand why Chen Yiming went there to practice. Of course, he didn't want others to see him. But Xiao Ye went there for no reason. Was he there to remember someone? It's about to start, right? This should be the last battle. The man in white said, previously, the disciple who was bullied by Elder Gu was rumored to have outstanding talent. But in the end, he became a coward and didn't fight a single battle. It seems that some people are oversensitive. Xiao Ye looked at the field. The man's words had a hidden meaning. He asked, Who are some people? Don't tell me you're talking about this elder? I don't dare. The man in white bowed hurriedly and said, A while ago, there was a rumor that this person had outstanding talent and a strong and fierce personality. More importantly, his surname is Jiang, so, he's a bit sensitive. Xiao Ye said, He has a strong and fierce personality, but he's stubborn. He's famous, but he doesn't dare to fight in the inner sect competition. After he finished speaking, he stopped. The field was about to start. The last battle, Li Yiqing against Chen Yiming. The moment the exam elder finished speaking, the cheers at the side of the field reached its peak. The sound of the cheers resounded through the sky and spread far and wide. But suddenly, the sound of a blade rang through the sky. Buzz, buzz, buzz. That sound was like a long blade whistling in front of them. It was so loud that it hurt their eardrums. The cheers were all suppressed. Some people even covered their ears in pain. Immediately after, a strong light shone down from the sky, as if it was from beyond the 9 heavens. Then, a blade light rushed out at high speed and slashed directly at the center of the stage. Who said that this is the last battle? The voice came from afar. The long blade chopped down on the hemispherical light membrane enchantment. With a loud bang, the light membrane enchantment shattered like glass. The long blade went through the enchantment and cut into the ground with a poochie sound. Hua! The field was in an uproar. This is a barrier that the exam elders specially set up as a precaution. It was destroyed so easily like tofu. Whoosh! When the blade arrived, the person followed closely behind. It's him. Gu Qian and his followers, Qin Qing and her servant, and everyone who knew him, exclaimed in surprise. Inner Sect Top 10, Chen Yiming, Li Yiqing, Xiao Yi, Song Tianxiang, Yan Bo, Zhang Taixiong, Lu Jian. All of you can come together. Don't waste my time. Chapter 530. Domineering, absolutely domineering. He directly shattered the barrier and even declared that he would challenge 10 people by himself. Looking at this arrogant man, the surrounding audience strangely quieted down. Only a few people were whispering to each other. Jiang Xiu. Gu Qian couldn't help but widen his eyes. He still came. At the last moment, he still came. Miss, it's him. Qin Qing's maid cried out excitedly. Qin Qing was also stunned. She also thought that Jiang Xiu had given up. It was already the last battle and everything was too late, but he still appeared. Jiang Xiu's gaze swept across the field. His eyes were proud and arrogant. He stood there like a king. Once he entered battle mode, his aura would constantly rise. This was cultivated from years of life and death battles. This was also the common trait of top experts. Why didn't you hear what I said? Chen Yiming, Li Yiqing, Xiao Yi, Song Tianxiang, Yan Bo, Zhang Taixiong, Lu Jian. Could it be that the 10 of you don't dare to fight with me? The surrounding people were in an uproar. Is he really going to challenge all 10 of the inner disciples? Who does he think he is? Someone laughed. He's too arrogant. Even a true disciple can't challenge all 10 of them. He's just looking for a beating. On the cliff of a distant mountain, Xiao Yi and the linen-clothed man were shocked when they saw Jiang Xiu. First, it was because Jiang Xiu, a mere inner disciple, was able to break the barrier with one strike. It should be known that the barrier was enough to block the full power of the battle between Li Yiqing and Chen Yiming. The other reason was similar. He really is similar. The linen-clothed man was somewhat absent-minded. At that moment, he seemed to have seen Jiang Luoxia, the majestic Jiang Luoxia who despised everything. No wonder those people were so nervous. Xiao Yi's gaze was fixed on Jiang Xiu. He opened his mouth and said, "It was too sudden." This elder didn't notice how he broke the barrier. Did you see it clearly? The linen-clothed man shook his head. I didn't either. Just now, when they thought they were going to fight, they suddenly felt a saber intent. Then, a shocking saber light slashed down. When the saber fell, they didn't even feel that it was from an inner disciple. They thought it was from a peak master or even an elder. His strength is not enough. There must be another reason. This kind of barrier could only be broken with strength by an upper celestial immortal. Breaking the barrier. The two on the cliff's expression once again. Because with their knowledge and ability, they might not be able to break the barrier. unless they had high attainments in array. Arrogant, Li Yiqing angrily rebuked. This was supposed to be a battle where he would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. However, this brat had stolen the limelight. Li Yiqing rolled the long sword in his hand and blasted it out with a thunderous force. Lose for me. Zhang Xiu rushed toward Li Yiqing, and a long saber appeared in his hand. A silver saber aura separated the airflow and slashed toward Li Yiqing. Dang! Two incomparably sharp sword will and saber domain clashed together. Li Yiqing was indeed worthy of being ranked second on the heroes' ranking list. When he clashed with the saber light, he felt that something was wrong. His sword will that could tear apart the void was actually suppressed by the saber will of his opponent. The saber force that filled the sky gushed forth like a vast ocean. Wang! The saber whistled. Silver light rushed to the sky and dyed the entire horizon a different color. Li Yiqing's handsome face was completely distorted. He was in pain. It was like he was crying from being crushed by a powerful force. The long sword in his hand seemed to be pressed down by 10,000 pounds. He drew half a circle with great difficulty. He wanted to form a sword art. However, the curse that was condensed in his hand dissipated little by little before it could form. Boom, boom, boom. The curse continued to shatter. It was like the sound of glass shattering. Boom. Li Yiqing could no longer hold it in. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, his entire body flew out. The saber cheese momentum did not decrease. It twisted the air behind him until it was unable to bear the burden. You can't even withstand a single blow. Zhang Xiu smiled coldly at Li Yiqing, who was lying on the ground. He strode past him. The energy around him surged. The wind and clouds in the sky swept over. How? Gu Qian slowly stood up from his seat. The people around him were all stunned. One saber. He defeated the second in the inner sect with just one saber. They were speechless. Many people's eyes were about to pop out. At this moment, the aura that Zhang Xiu displayed was so strong that it was at the level of a middle sky god. He really made a breakthrough. Qin Qing covered her mouth in horror, and her beautiful eyes almost fell out of their sockets. This cultivation speed. It was monstrous. According to the Qianqing school's records, this speed was several times faster than the second in rank. Even the arrogant Zhang Luoxia was left far behind. He reached the level of a middle sky god in just over a month. Xiao Ya's face was also filled with shock. This elder remembers that when he first entered the sect, he was registered as an early-stage lower heavenly god. It has only been a short period of less than 4 months. The man in plain clothes was also stunned. The entire Qianqing school was shocked. Next, Zhang Xiu strode toward Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming was on guard. The man in front of him was like a demon or a god. His battle intent was monstrous. It was as if he wanted to crush and destroy everything. You think you can defeat me just because you defeated Li Yiqing? Naive. Roar. Chen Yiming bent his body, and a misty green halo spread out. A huge phantom of a demonic dragon rushed up to the sky from his back. He made a gesture with both of his hands, and it was very mysterious, causing the surrounding air to rotate. Ancient demon loose hands. Boom. He pressed his palm gently. It was said that in ancient times, there was a great demon who was once ranked as one of the top 3 emperors of immortal martial arts. He relied on a pair of mysterious and unfathomable hands, which were the so-called loose hands. He was known as the master of all fists. Later on, all the loose hands that the great demons cultivated were passed down from his hands. Everyone was used to calling this type of loose hands the ancient demon loose hands. The physical strength of the ancient demon was already unimaginably powerful. It could compete with the ancient gods and ancient shamans. In addition, it contained endless skills and mysterious loose hands. Its power was really unimaginable. The light on his palm kept flashing, and the strange scene swelled. Suddenly, it expanded fiercely. With a gurgling sound, it suddenly grew to a size of several meters. It was pushed over with his movements. The elephant turned around. It was difficult to move. At first, it was very slow. However, in the next moment, its speed increased. The constantly expanding palm flashed out. His palm was enough to destroy a mountain. Before the palm force arrived, the fist intent had already torn the rocky ground apart. As the giant palm flashed out, the clouds in the sky behind it had already been hit by a palm print. "You're just a fake demon. How dare you embarrass yourself in front of a true god?" Demons and gods were both different kinds of living beings. Jiang Xiu raised his right hand and did not even look at Chen Yiming. With a bang, he sent out a palm. His palm was dazzling with golden light, and there were even red flames inside. It was also like an elephant turning around. At first, it was very slow, but once its speed increased, the giant palm fiercely collided with the giant palm that was charging at him. The two monstrous giant palms collided like two mountains. Boom! Jiang Xiu's giant palm was like a god descending, while Chen Yiming's giant palm was like a demon's claw, especially a dragon's claw. One could even see scales on it. To be able to cultivate the ancient demon loose hands to such a level, it was no wonder that Chen Yiming could occupy the #1 position in the inner sect for many years. However, when the indestructible beast claw came into contact with the golden flame-like divine palm, the strong light from there penetrated the beast claw. Then, the divine palm crushed the beast claw bit by bit until it disappeared into nothingness. At this moment, it was as if time and space were being stretched infinitely. "You're defeated." Boom, the divine palm only paused for a moment before completely destroying the beast claw. Its momentum did not decrease in the slightest. Like a ray of light, it rushed into the distance. The mountain top in the distance exploded with a bang, and rocks tumbled down. And Chen Yiming's entire person was swept away by the palm force. He felt that the surrounding air was like the light of fireworks. As his body leaned back, blood spurted out from his mouth. Can't even withstand a single blow. One palm, and only one move. The two in the inner sect actually could not withstand a single move from him. The surroundings were silent. A deathly silence. Jiang Xiu looked into the distance, pointed at Gu Qian, and said loudly, "Surnamed Gu, do you still remember my words? Wash your neck and wait for death." Chapter 531. Yes, Jiang Xiu didn't have enough points. He had only defeated 2 people in total, but who dared to say that he wasn't qualified? The 2 top elites of the inner sect couldn't even take a single move from him. Just now, he had said that he would fight against 10 people by himself, and everyone had sneered at him, mocking him for only being arrogant. But now, no one doubted that he had this kind of ability. Strong, too strong. How could a disciple who had just entered the sect for less than half a year be so strong? He was really a monster. Looking at him, everyone's expression changed. They were incomparably shocked, including Xiao Ye, who had already become a celestial king. At this moment, his heart also suffered a violent impact. He wasn't shocked by Jiang Xiu's strength, but by Jiang Xiu's natural talent. The strong would look down on the weak, but when this weak showed an unparalleled speed of growth, they would also be shocked, feel threatened, and even feel fear. Jiang Xiu's natural talent was admittedly shocking, but his personality was too challenging. He was never afraid, and this made everyone present feel even more afraid of this person. When gathered together, it was Jiang Xiu who was in front of them. He was different from the rest, as if he was going to break free from all shackles, an ambitious and ruthless person who was destined to rise. Gu Qian stood there, his face flushed red, and his lips twitching. That ant that he thought he could pinch as he pleased, that he would live if he wanted to live, and that he would die if he wanted to die, was now condescendingly issuing a death threat to him. Originally, it was he who was bullying Jiang Xiu, but now it was the other way around. Jiang Xiu wanted his life. How fierce was this counterattack! The surrounding people all cast strange gazes at him. There was mockery, doubt, gloating, and even sympathy. This made Gu Qian feel very uncomfortable. All the pores on his body opened, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. A few words jumped out of his mouth fiercely. "Jiang Xiu, you dare to provoke me, then don't blame me for killing you when the time comes." After all, he was a true disciple. Although Jiang Xiu had defeated 2 top inner sect disciples in a single move, he didn't lose face, and was definitely not afraid of his words, either. However, he had been completely overwhelmed by Jiang Xiu in terms of momentum. "Jiang Xiu, even though you have won 2 rounds in a row, you don't have enough points. You don't have the qualifications to challenge a true disciple." At this moment, the exam elder said, "According to the rules, only the top 200 inner disciples were qualified. Jiang Xiu had only won 2 matches in total and had only accumulated 4 points. Jiang Xiu's expression didn't change. This was indeed the rule in Tianqing school. He glanced at everyone present. Xiao Yi, Song Tianxiang, Yan Bo, Zhang Taixiong, Lu Jian. None of you dare to accept the challenge? What kind of joke was this? Even the strongest 2 of them had been insta-killed in a single move. Going up to look for a beating and leaving someone behind? I admit defeat. A man spoke up. This person was Xiao Yi. Whoosh. The crowd was once again in an uproar. He actually admitted defeat without even going up the stage. This was a rare occurrence in the inner sect battles. He didn't even have the courage to go up the stage. How embarrassing was that? I also admit defeat. I also admit defeat. Seeing the previously arrogant geniuses hanging their heads like defeated roosters, the exam elder couldn't do anything about it no matter how unwilling he was. We also admit defeat. In his previous life, there were 2 complete defeats and 8 people who admitted defeat. However, Jiang Xiu still didn't have enough points. He glanced at them one by one. Wherever he looked, they all lowered their heads. I admit defeat. I also admit defeat. No one in the entire inner sect dared to accept the challenge. The scene was very strange, but it cast Jiang Xiu's unparalleled prestige. Since then, Jiang Xiu was invincible in the inner sect. Miss, he really did it. Qin Qing nodded. She didn't know why, but she was actually a little excited. He really did it. In just a little more than a month, he became a middle god. He suppressed the entire inner sect until they couldn't raise their heads. I really have nothing to say. Jiang Xiu said, "Now, how about it?" His gaze looked straight at the law enforcement elder who tried to make Jiang Xiu not have the right to challenge. 2 points per person. How many points do we have now? The law enforcement elder's face was ashen. This was not wishing you a happy birthday. This was admitting defeat and surrendering. As far as the eye could see, there were tens of thousands of points. 2 points per person. His points had already crushed everything. Why do you have nothing to say? The law enforcement elder said, "You have the qualifications to challenge the successor disciple." Jiang Xiu's eyes swept towards Gu Qian in the distance, then turned and left. The successor disciple battle was different from the inner sect. It was a real fight for resources. Moreover, the core figures of the sect would also be present. This child is not ordinary. After Xiao Ye waited for Jiang Xiu to leave, he spat out such an evaluation. What? The elder is tempted. Could it be that you want to take him as a disciple? The cloth-clothed man asked. However, he saw Xiao Ye lightly shake his head. He smiled and said, "That's true. Of all people to look like, you just have to look like him." Xiao Ye said, "Whoever holds him in their hands, he will be a hot potato." The cloth-clothed man said, "That's right. Right now, everyone is so sensitive. Whoever takes him in, it's inevitable that the person in the seat will think too much. Even if that person doesn't think too much, the people around him will. What a pity. It's also his fate." The news had already spread like the wind throughout the Tianqing school. Before Jiang Xiu returned home, the news had already reached the ears of the servant girl, Wang Xinya. It was the servant next door who said it. He exaggerated Jiang Xiu to the skies. Wang Xinya's eyebrows danced as she heard Jiang Xiu's voice. She was extremely happy. Young master. Then what about them? Wang Xinya said. Sister Zhao Rong and Xiao Yu went to Chenqing City to buy things. Brother Li accompanied them. This servant will make some tea for young master and then go down the mountain to find them. During this time seclusion, Jiang Xiu felt the power of the great god sealing technique. The cultivation speed of a god cultivator was actually faster than any other method. It was truly worthy of being the foundation of all god cultivators. The creation jade butterfly was ranked 11th among the 3,000 great Tao. This made him extremely happy. For the next step, he would change the direction of his cultivation and focus on developing his divine body. This path was the fastest way to improve his realm. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be able to rush to the peak of the upper sky god realm. When he reached the peak, his soul strength and comprehension of the laws would be insufficient. However, he had to race against time. Not only did he want to shock the Chenqing school, he also wanted to shock the Azure Spirit List. He wanted the entire Immortal Martial Arts Academy to know that an even more monstrous genius had appeared in the Chenqing school. Only when one was monstrous enough and had a big enough reputation could one have greater influence and right to speak. Jiang Xiu had a feeling that since Lu Chongkong was already suspicious of him, the others would naturally be suspicious as well. At this time, the more he hid himself, the greater the suspicion would be. Only by being honest and unscrupulous could he reduce this suspicion. More importantly, he had to be more powerful and heaven-defying than the Jiang Luoxia of his previous life. He had to leave him far behind and shake off their understanding of the original Jiang Luoxia. Only then could he completely clear himself of suspicion. They could suspect that he was Jiang Luoxia, but once Jiang Xiu showed that he was stronger than Jiang Luoxia, what reason would they have to suspect? That would be a brand new powerhouse. The Ji Dao sect won't take long. Soon, before he went into seclusion, Lu Chongkong told him a very important thing. Perhaps this was the main reason why the Ji Dao sect could collude with him to take the position of sect master. He had a marriage alliance with the Tai Hua sect. In other words, the Tai Hua sect's intervention had affected the Chenqing school's sect master. What kind of behavior was this? What was the difference between this and betraying one's country for glory? Thinking of this, Jiang Xiu forcefully crushed the teacup with a bang. This matter made him even angrier than the Ji Dao sect's plot to take away his position as sect master. A few days later, as the winning disciple of the Chenqing school, Jiang Xiu received a large number of resources as a reward. There were differences between divine cultivation and immortal cultivation, and the items required were also different. However, most of these items could still be used. It was just that Jiang Xiu didn't really care about them. After becoming a middle heavenly god, the difficulty of advancing had increased exponentially. The amount of resources he needed was even greater, and the resources were also even more precious. He needed to find a way to enter the 3 upper peaks. Most of his things were hidden in the 3 upper peaks, but once he entered the 3 upper peaks now, he would definitely be discovered. Therefore, he had to win the successor battle as soon as possible. Before the successor battle began, the Chenqing school welcomed a distinguished guest, and a large number of disciples lined the streets to welcome him. Chapter 532. There was news that a beautiful woman came. It didn't matter if she was a man or a woman. What was important was that she was from the Tai Hua faction and came to watch the core battle. In the eyes of the higher-ups, the outer gate battle and the inner gate battle were just child's play. The core combat power of Chenqing school and the true disciples were the ones who really decided the fate of Chenqing school. Jiang Xiu didn't count carefully, but there were more than 1,000 people. It didn't sound like a lot. After all, one enlightened master could dominate a region. More than 1,000 enlightened master disciples, who were still in the growth stage, gathered together. How powerful would they be? Dozens of true disciples of Chenqing school were enough to make the countries and dynasties of the spiritual state feel like they were facing a great enemy. No country would show their real weapons in front of the enemy. If someone leaked it, it would be considered betrayal. At that time, people from the Taihua faction could come to watch the core battle openly, and a large number of disciples even lined the streets to welcome them. This reminded Zhang Xiu of the 100 years when the earth lost its power and humiliated its country. In Zhang Xiu's courtyard, Shangguan Zhaorong was still listening to Wang Xinya's story. At that time, the young master arrived in time and shattered the barrier with a heavenly blade. When the young master appeared, everyone was shocked. Wang Xinya was very excited, and the maid beside her was even more excited. Then, the young master said that he would fight 10 people. Of course, they didn't believe it. Li Yiqing, who ranked second in the internal battle, was not convinced and rushed up to fight with the young master. The young master raised his blade and slashed. She said it as if she was there in person, but in fact, she heard it herself. However, not only did the two maids believe it, but they also didn't get tired of hearing it. Now, the entire Tianqing school was discussing Zhang Xiu's talent. It was amazing. Ever since the inner court battle ended, Wu Zhankue, who lived in the same area as Zhang Xiu, as well as the other disciples who had entered the Sky Motion sect with him, all stopped coming to visit Zhang Xiu. Firstly, Zhang Xiu was too high for them to reach. Secondly, Zhang Xiu was in the eye of the storm. If they were too close to Zhang Xiu, if Zhang Xiu lost in the true disciple battle, they would be implicated. Therefore, in the past few days, other than a few maids causing a ruckus, it was relatively quiet. In addition, it might be because the successor battle was approaching, or the entire sect knew that Zhang Xiu wanted to challenge him. Gu Qian did not secretly find people to deal with Zhang Xiu. The heavenly music outside was getting closer and closer. Those who could represent the Taihua sect to come here were definitely not small fries. Of course, they would travel in groups, as if they were foreign troops. Along the way, there were flowers and plants in full bloom, and red petals scattered all over the sky. In the room, Zhang Xiu stopped cultivating. Although he had been cultivating these days, he was worried that Gu Qian would find trouble with him, so he could not devote himself to it. In addition, he had been in seclusion for many times in a row, so his body and mind needed to be adjusted. Seeing the teacup on the long table with warm smoke, Shangguan Zhaorong took good care of him. He walked over, picked up the teacup and took a sip. His eyes turned cold. So it's her. Even though they were far apart, Zhang Xiu could still use a secret technique to see that it was a graceful fairy with a pearl crown on her head, wearing a golden robe, and wearing heavy makeup on her face. She looked very noble. Zhang Yan, the niece of the Taihua sect's leader. Although she sounded like a junior, in reality, she was older than the Taihua sect's leader. Zhang Xiu could not be compared to her in terms of age. Some people even said that she was over 10,000 years old. Hundreds of years ago, Zhang Xiu went to Taihua alone and dominated all the heroes of Taihua. She was one of them. Although many things had happened, Zhang Xiu still had a deep impression of her. This woman's cultivation was not low, and her methods were all top-notch. If I had known this would happen, I would have killed you back then. Zhang Xiu's eyes were filled with murderous intent. In that battle, on Tianhua Mountain, Zhang Xiu led Zhang Luoxia to become the fastest immortal king in the world. It could be said that he was very imposing. He went to cause a big scene and killed many disciples of Taihua sect. In the end, the Taihua sect's leader and the elders left with a big laugh, and the Taihua sect's dignity was swept to the ground. At that time, if Zhang Xiu had acted a little faster and stopped talking so much nonsense, he would have had enough time to get rid of Zhang Yan. Then, Zhang Yan wouldn't have come to the Heaven Motion sect so arrogantly today. It was like the saying, every dog has its day. It's such nice heavenly music. Sister Zhaorong, let's go and have a look. Okay. At this moment, Zhang Xiu pushed open the door and walked out. The sun was very bright outside. It was autumn, and the air was a little cooler and more bleak. Young master, she spat out a sentence that the maids had never heard before. Shang girls don't know the sorrow of their country's destruction, but they still sing the song of the backyard flowers across the river. Tianqing School's reputation was swept to the ground. In front of such a great humiliation, the maids were completely unaware. Where are we going? Shangguan Zhaorong was very clever. Although Jiang Xiu's face was expressionless and cold as usual, he had never asked the maids before. It was really surprising that he suddenly asked today. There's heavenly music coming from outside. I heard that the Tai Hua sect has a precious guest. We want to go and have a look. Young master, do you want to go with us? Yes, young master, do you want to go with us? Young master, you've been cultivating at home all the time. You should relax occasionally. The three maids talked at once. Jiang Xiu's face turned cold. Don't you have anything else to do? What's so good about the people of the Tai Hua sect? Don't you know that the Tai Hua sect and the Qianqing school are both in the spiritual state? There can't be two tigers in one mountain, and the feud between the two sects has been going back tens of thousands of years. Of course, the maids didn't dare to act rashly. Shangguan Zhaorong said, but if that's the case, why did the people of the Tai Hua sect come to the Qianqing school to watch the successor battle? What do you think? Jiang Xiu's face turned even colder. Shangguan Zhaorong didn't understand, but she knew even more clearly that the young master was angry and didn't want them to watch. They could feel that the young master hated the people of the Tai Hua sect. Jiang Xiu also wanted to know why. Was it because the Ji Dao sect married a female disciple of the Tai Hua sect? Or was it because the Ji Dao sect asked the Tai Hua sect for help when they were fighting for the position of sect master? However, Jiang Xiu did not realize that a pair of eyes had been staring at them the entire time. He had seen everything clearly. Jiang Xiu was extremely confident in himself. He could sense any spying, but he had neglected the opponent he was facing. He had even forgotten that he was still very, very far away from his peak cultivation. We won't go. Young master, how about Zhao Rong make some pastries for your afternoon tea? Hearing this, Jiang Xiu's anger eased a little. At the top of the stairs of the Qianqing school, the sect master and many elders were there to welcome this guest from the Tai Hua sect. The arrival of this guest also indicated that the successor battle was about to start. Jiang Xiu didn't have much time to cultivate. Cousin. A woman wearing a snow-white gown, with a tail that was 3 to 4 meters long and fluttering in the wind, called out happily when she saw Jiang Yan. I'm sorry to let brother-in-law receive you here. After the woman went over and bowed, she said enthusiastically, Cousin, your presence brings light to my Qianqing school. How can we not welcome you? Besides, I haven't seen you for many years. I'm worried about you and can't wait to see you. Jiang Yan reached out and pinched the woman's nose. You're so talkative. Then, her eyes fell on the tall man with a strong and domineering figure. Brother-in-law. Qianqing school was the most respected school in the spirit state, but she only called him brother-in-law. There was no family affection in the royal family. It was all about the rules. Even the emperor's uncle had to kneel when he saw the daughter of the empress. Jiang Yan was indeed rude this time. Many Qianqing school disciples couldn't stand it, but there was nothing they could do. After all, he was their brother-in-law. The sect master's family is happy and harmonious, yet you still dare to stand out and shout? The Heaven Motion sect doesn't have someone like Wei Zheng. Elder Jiang, you've worked hard. Jiang Yan said, Really? What a coincidence. On the way here, I passed by Qianqing City and heard that there was another super genius in your sect. He rushed from the early stage of the lower Sky God realm to the early stage of the middle Sky God realm in 4 months and took first place in the inner gate. There is such a person, but there are many geniuses in Qianqing school who are more amazing than him. But how many of them can really grow from geniuses? Geniuses often end up in tragedy. Zhang Luoxia is a good example. Hearing this, Jiang Yan smiled. When will the real nuclear war begin? Since Elder Jiang is here, let's start tomorrow. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.